it working? I think it's working.
For most of human history, every day was a brutal search for food, shelter, and safety from that big cat set on using your femur as a toothpick. But then, something strange happened. One clever cave dweller smashed a stone with another stone and created a smaller, sharper stone that turned animals into food faster. This act alone triggered a multi-million-year journey of tool refinement that culminated with you watching this video on your phone right now. But then, when you oversimplify it for a second, how much has actually changed? After all, a computer chip is just a bunch of smaller stones that some clever lab dweller smashed into a thinking machine. Except instead of using it to brain another mammal,
Blindola says, oh no step bro, I tripped into the water.
At 11 a.m.
Hello, Window.
We live in decadent times, where our short-term survival is all but certain, but our purpose...
That was pretty funny.
Welcome to the Second Stone Age. Welcome to Slop World.
How are you, Window? Okay, too loud.
Says I saw a target and aimed then shot.
Today's Slop World.
Oh, good shot.
Friction. Now, in this context, friction is a Silicon Valley businessy buzzword, which refers to any process or point of resistance that slows customers down in the pursuit of what they're buying from you. Now, modern technology is fantastic at facilitating frictionless experiences. Amazon one-click ordering is faster than going to a store. Swiping for an Uber requires fewer calories than calling a cab. Just about. The point is, tech gets us to our beloved products.
That reminds me. Hey, Vinduella, is
His phone facing 45-degree angle.
ride-hailing apps are illegal, right? At least they were in like Copenhagen and most other Scandinavian places I went to. Like you don't have like Uber and stuff, right? Gosh darn it, behave.
Blindola says I haven't seen any Ubers, but we got things like Foodora.
Foodora is like food delivery, right?
In order to get what you want. But maybe, our ceaseless demand for less friction is making us and the societies we live in worse. Maybe, sometimes, a bit of friction is a good thing. In 2015, McDonald's started installing these digital kiosks in all of their US locations. In the first year of their deployment, they led to a 6% increase in sales. All because they reduced friction. They sped up the ordering process, and they were programmed to always upsell you on extras. But more importantly, these kiosks had a profound effect on customer behavior. Ordering through a screen enables users to bypass the social shame
Blindola
they
says,
might
yeah,
have
it's like
otherwise
food
felt
delivery,
if they
very
had
similar
ordered
to
from a
Uber.
human.
Okay.
You have to register
A
with the
dozen
company as
extra
an
hash
actual
browns
employee.
for breakfast?
But the
All you have
business
to do
model is
make
very
sure
similar,
your
I think,
greasy finger
otherwise.
doesn't slip off the screen as you vigorously demand more. Shame functions as a kind of social friction, and these 7-foot side order salesmen are letting us skip this friction altogether. So this is a small-scale example of what I call digital decadence. Digital decadence. This is where modern technology facilitates moral decay by reducing the natural friction involved in pursuing our worst impulses. Today, the word decadent has fallen out of fashion, partly because of its sort of judgmental, religious implications, eroded by decades of glorified consumerism. It has been defanged and reduced to a positive marketing term. You are more likely to hear it used to describe a chocolate cake than to hear it directed at a indulgent, product-obsessed person. And this is bad. This is bad because history is littered with once great societies that collapsed under the weight of their own end-era decadence. The Roman Empire, Heian era Japan, pre-revolutionary France, Qing dynasty China. What do all these civilizations have in common? Well, they were ruled by elites who had closed themselves off into vacuum-sealed worlds of excess, becoming so alienated from ordinary life that they lost any semblance of perspective on how to run these societies that they were in charge of. Now, what makes today different is that the frivolous luxuries that these elites were distracted by have now filtered down to the bottom of society as well. Think about it. Even the Empress Dowager Cixi would go blind with envy over your ability to wordlessly command a nameless servant to chauffeur air-conditioned quesadillas to your sofa in the middle of the night. Our era of app-enabled convenience is, wonderful, but it is also an ahistorical luxury, and a bizarre one at that. So here's my thesis, right? We need to bring back decadence as a devastating insult for a morally defective person/society. We need to rediscover collective and individual shame. So the rest of this video will include a lot of shaming. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good. Here's a little taster. DoorDash, Uber Eats, Deliveroo, or whatever slop chauffeur service is in your country. These apps are digital decadence defined. Grubhub started us on this journey, offering easy delivery from restaurants that already offered it themselves. But they were mowed down.
Oh, you've sent a... Wait, you have sent...
competitors.
Sorry, the text-to-speech does not voice out links. Alright, what do we have here? Okay, how do I even see this? Finish update? What? Cool. Yo, this is sick. This is like this is a cool boss design. I freaking love it. It's awesome. Holy crap. It's so cool.
Winola says it's a Rakshasa.
It's Lionel's final form. This is so cool. Hello. It's pretty sick, man. What just happened? I really like this. It really does feel like an awesome boss.
Windola says me when I'm not drawing boobily women.
It's really good, man. I really like it. Okay, yeah, so now tell me about this. What is it? Rakshas. Acha, Rakshasha is how you would say it. In our language, it's a Rakshas. I am intrigued. Tell me more.
Based bike delivery service for lazy, city-dwelling Europeans. But their real innovation was delivering food that you once had to leave your house to acquire. Once upon a 2012 ago, you actually had to walk or drive to KFC. Now your bucket of bird carcass flies to you. So DoorDash entered the game pretty late, before becoming the all-out market leader. Their core innovation was building the necessary digital infrastructure to bring the slop to the suburbs. The company started life as a student project at Stanford, before it was given over $500 million in seed funding from SoftBank. It then decided to follow the game plan that every SoftBank-funded WeWorkian zero-interest rate era white
Windola
whale
says
did
her name is
in the
Melissa.
2010s.
She's
In
a bounty
2025,
hunter,
we're
demonic
already
panther
living
from a
in
hell
the
planet in the
ruins
story.
of an ended era
She's got
of
stealth
shocking
abilities
decadence.
and everything.
She sounds awesome.
Pre-COVID era of zero interest rate policy.
She sounds like Battle Beast.
Era. After the recession, Western central banks slashed interest rates.
She sounds cool in the way that Battle Beast is cool.
And investment. If you had enough money already and could therefore take out massive loans from the bank, this was basically the free money era. And this low interest rate environment spawned a new kind of venture capital investment called blitzscaling. First, you're going to want to raise enough venture capital cash to buy God. Then, use that cash to subsidize demand with artificially low prices. This will run your competitors off the road because you will be operating at a loss and kind of, defying capitalistic gravity. After a few years, if everything goes right, you will then become the market leader, at which point you will be free to jack those prices way, way back up. So DoorDash became the market leader in 2019, and yet it still didn't have a profitable quarter until the back half of 2024. And yeah, it didn't even make a profit during that 2-year blip where the entire planet became shut-ins. And despite this, DoorDash is largely seen as the archetype of ZERP-era success. They entered the field late and still ended up dominating their market by subsidizing delivery fees and paying their drivers slightly more than their competitors. Something they were only able to do because of the billions they'd gotten from venture capital and the near-zero interest rate era they were founded in. Looking back at the ZERP era, it's remembered more for its failures, right? WeWork, FTX, Quibi. But DoorDash is seen as the case study for blitzscaling success because it inspired international copycats everywhere who followed its example to a T and succeeded too. Swiggy and Zomato now command a duopoly in India. iFood is the market leader in Brazil and many other South American
Windola
countries.
says she's like ferocious but not like untamed. She's got quite the intelligence.
Meituan
Think the Predator
Dingping
from
dominates in China.
Sounds cool,
Strikes with
It
deadly
actually
precision.
employs its delivery drivers directly.
but not untamed. She's got quite the intelligence. I think the Predator from Alien, a measured warrior who strikes with deadly precision. Sounds cool, man.
Wage and insurance coverage. But
Sounds
what's
awesome.
the larger cultural impact of these platforms? Well, they triple the number of accessible restaurants in any given area. But they also turn low-income urban areas into cyber food swamps, making the least healthy, worst food the most easily accessible. The limited public data that we have on delivery apps suggests that their biggest pay pigs are single, millennial men living alone. But their biggest impact is that across the world, they have created a new caste classification in the 21st century economy. The ostensibly self-employed gig economy pseudo-slave. The riders and drivers that now crowd every developed city on Earth, and the invisible ghost kitchen chefs who are sweating seed oil into your
Windola
Mr. Beast
says I wanted the
burger
design
in
to
some
reflect
shipping
that.
container cookhouse.
I could have put spikes everywhere.
The gig economy
Instead, it's got
is
studs and a
rarely
lot of round
regulated,
elements to try
when
and
it is,
reflect her skillful
enforcement is
nature.
weak. In theory, the
I
gig
think that's a good decision.
for people with limited access to employment. You know, that thing that the government should be doing? But in practice, it's a grey economy, which facilitates illegal migrants, tax cheats, and unscrupulous business owners to skirt employment regulations that were written before these apps existed. In summary, app-enabled food delivery has produced dozens of unprofitable companies and facilitates a worldwide grey market just so we can eat lukewarm, overpriced restaurant food in our living rooms. But the ZIRP era is over, right? Post-COVID, central banks had no choice but to raise interest rates, ending this bizarre period of gravity-defying capitalism. DoorDash got profitable mostly by abandoning the practices that facilitated its rise. They jacked up delivery fees, reduced rider pay, and
Windola
stealthily
says now the
marked
question
up
is,
menu items.
smash or pass?
Very clever, that one.
Yeah.
And you might think that customers would abandon them as a result. Basic market capitalism, right? If the product is more
I think she's she's too much for me to handle.
you don't understand
I'll have to pass.
about human nature.
Unless I'm in the mood for some juju till death.
It only takes a few years of access to something new before it becomes something we expect. And we'll pay more for it, even spend beyond our means just to maintain the lifestyle to which we have become accustomed. The fact that you can take
Windola
out a
says she's
Klarna
not gonna
loan
pass
to
on you, though, dark
finance
mode.
your crunch
Oh
wrap
no,
proves this point.
I'm in trouble.
Luxuries become habits, habits become expectations, expectations become entitlements. And this is the lasting cultural impact of the zero interest rate era. Habit-forming apps hooked people into a level of decadence that they could only afford in the first place because venture capital was footing part of the bill. Digital decadence. So if 2012 to 2022 was the free money era, what period are we in now? Well, I think we are in the early rumblings of the free labor era. Without as low interest rates, our venture capital elites still want to keep the party going. But if they are going to hand out billions, they need to now have some evidence of
Windola
short-term
says, but yet
profit.
one day I'd love to do
And I
some
think
character design
the
on
way
the side.
that scummy startups will start sucking up to them is by showing them how they can replace
Oh, you mean like as a job, as a project,
AI alternative.
etc.
And if this works in the way that they claim it will, it is going to create a generation of overeducated, underutilized young people, rightly angry, having been
Windola
told
says
that
pro
an
yet.
expensive university education is their path to
That would be good, man. But you know, the world has just changed very drastically over the last few years. Like I'm having trouble figuring out what to do to make a living. So as fun as it would be, I don't know, man. I think you are much better off because you have such a vibrant.
Says that's why I'd do it on the side.
I think you're much better off doing like using this for your own Like, uh, I mean, if I had the wherewithal, if I had the ability to learn or make myself learn how to make a game, like I would want to be like, yeah, I would. I mean, I want to do it. I want to start on like my own projects, game projects, my own products. I think you still have a lot more neuroplasticity than I do. So yeah, I mean, make your own game, man. Um, I think your especially the world that you're creating is so particular that you really should channel like your vision into your own stuff as opposed to, you know what, a big part of why like my brain is mush as well is because I've just been a working professional my entire life and just worked for other people's ideas and spent all my energies serving other people's visions. So like it created a slave in me, you know, and the slave is very afraid of trying stuff out on its own. So you don't have a slave in you yet, and I would much rather you not put yourself in situations where a slave could be created inside you.
Only to have that future
I'll be
snatched
right back.
by a line of products that will only bring massive profits to a high-tech elite.
My kid will never grow up, will never ever be smarter than an AI. That will never happen. You know, kid born a few years ago, they had a brief period of time. My kid never will be smarter. But also, they'll never know a world where like products and services aren't way smarter than them and super capable. They can just do whatever you need. And in that world, I think education's gonna feel very different. I already think college is like maybe not working great for most people.
It is almost suspiciously convenient that ChatGPT arrived the exact year that interest rates went up, but let's dispense with the conspiracy theories for now because the truth is sus enough. The fact that spending on data centers and AI software has eclipsed all other American consumer spending combined is crazy. And this absurd spending is all based on the promise of near-term superintelligence or the threat of China outcompeting us. It has now become a zero-sum game. Either AI becomes super intelligent and makes the US economy super efficient by making swathes of intellectual labor obsolete, or they're just gonna fuck it completely, right? Maybe AI capacity plateaus. Maybe it already is, and we are about to smash into the Great Depression 2.0 just in time for the original's 100-year anniversary. Our elites are betting on a black box, hoping that its contents will bring them untold riches. This is Labubu loot box logic, baby, and the average consumer is following their example. Now, if you are worried about all this, just relax, play some ocean sounds, and lie on the ground. Ground news, that is.
Oh God.
Surprise ad read. OT.
I really like that design, friend. It's pretty cool.
Says I wouldn't too much about me.
The
I got a
High-End
good
era
head on the
was
shoulder,
a golden age of
but I
insane
appreciate the
Macaulay
input.
refinement.
Better
where
safe than
Kyoto
sorry,
Palace
right?
elites had built
Yeah, I know.
beautiful little world for themselves.
You know what?
They basically forgot
This is also something I've discovered. Anytime anybody gives somebody else advice, who they're actually giving advice to is their own younger self. You know? That's all that's actually happening.
Windola says, so what you're saying is that I should have responded okay Gramps.
Yeah. Okay, boomer.
How to run the country they ruled. Proximity to the emperor dictated how much power your family had, so all the elite families in this tiny little bubble devoted themselves to impressing high society, and therefore the emperor by extension. The Fujiwara clan in particular turned schmoozing into a century-spanning art form, spending all their earthly energy getting their daughters married to various emperors. And they achieved this by just killing it with the palace parlor games, which progressively revolved around overcomplicated courtship rituals and extremely competitive poetry contests. And because this became the way you got to power, courtly life got even more elegant and fancy and, look, it was very gay. It was incredibly gay. It made an episode of Queer Eye look like an oil rig knife fight. Everything revolved around aesthetics. Fabrics, face paint, teeth blackening, and fancy letter writing, where as much care was put into writing the letters as perfuming them. And because this closed-off ruling class were so distracted by all their perfumes and pugs, they delegated much of the actual ruling to provincial private armies far outside the capital. And these guys were called, or at least history calls them, the First Samurai. And these guys, they weren't fucking around with no poems. They were more into swords, you know, sharpening swords, polishing swords, and swinging swords to
Windola says, I think there's still
peasants.
a chance for you to get in touch with that childhood spark though.
As a result, they were sort of better prepared for the whole taking a country by force thing.
I mean, I'm trying to. It's just
Called the Genpei.
I need the world to help me out a little bit, you know.
Of the Kyoto Palace's dominance and the beginning of Japan's first.
I need to find just like one or two good partners.
So one historian that really dug the whole
I'm just not capable of doing stuff alone anymore.
was a guy called Oswald Spengler. Now, another thing that Spengler wasn't really a fan of was democracy. And boy, did the Nazis think that was cool. He wrote The Decline of the West, Volume 1, in 1918, and bits of it became the ideological basis for some core Nazi Party thought. So his ideas about the decadence of the Weimar Republic were extremely influential and definitely set the stage for its eventual collapse.
Windola says
But
maybe
Spengler also
or finding
hated the
something
Nazis,
which inspires you
and
on
when he
such a
met
fundamental
Hitler,
level
he
you just
thought
can't
he
stay
was
idle no
a
more.
vulgar, uncultured idiot. He then wrote a book that criticized.
Yeah, so my heart is in the mode where it's just it's afraid of its dreams now. It's had too many dreams shattered, so it's afraid of dreaming. So it can't power the engine that would make me do stuff, you know, as effectively. And I got too much information. Inspiration. I got stuff I really, really want to do. I just haven't found partners. So they are entombed in my heart. My dreams are entombed in my heart. Waiting to be kissed awake.
Nazi establishment and specifically the stupidity of Nazi race theory. This book was inevitably banned, and then Spengler died in 1936 at the peak of Nazi Party hysteria. Isolated and alienated from the post-democratic, mechanized society that he had inadvertently laid the intellectual groundwork for. Now, despite all of that, You should totally read Spengler, especially if you're like me and you like those unfashionable, grand theories of history. Plus, if you only read things that you think you'll agree with, you might as well not read anything at all. Feel free to
Windola says, I
disagree
guess
with
it
me
would be tough
on that
finding
one.
someone in Pakistan that
So-
would fit your vibe, yet considering how
So in The
conservative
Decline
it
of
is
the
there.
West, he argued that civilization...
No, actually, I think, I'm speaking specifically in, as in, like a partnership for the professional projects that I want to pursue. I think I've just been, unluckier than most, dude. I got stories. But, the kind of projects I want to, that I have in mind are like,
Windola says, oh, I see.
yeah, the kind of projects I want to pursue are not yeah, they're not especially risque or something. And a lot of, to be fair, a lot of these projects are just stuff I can do on my own as well. It's just I'm just yeah, you know, very I'm not. I don't have a. I'm well regarded socially. I walk a line that gives people the impression that I'm very well connected, and I make. I've been lucky in that I've made introductions for people, so people think that I'm very uh, socially useful. But having said all that, I just haven't found uh like the kind of people who'll be like partners in crime or just be like uh unconditional support in the way that I need, you know. So all that to say that I haven't found. I'm saying this as a prelude to that there are some projects for which I don't need any partners, you know. I wouldn't need any partners at all. But just, you know, for me, drawing, all this that I do, it's a distraction uh, from my unfulfillment. So it's almost like everything I do is like a form of self-soothing, a form of masturbation. Like it's leading nowhere, but I need to do it just so I don't jump off a building, you know. That's what most of this stream is. Me trying not to jump off a building. But if I, you know, I know what I need. I need if I can fall into the kind of social circumstances where I feel like I'm properly supported. I'm sorry, I shouldn't. You're young. I shouldn't be discussing this shit with you, man. But if I felt that way,
Yeah, I get it. Hope I'm making your day just that little brighter by being here then.
yeah, it is always nice to have you around, Windoella. Always nice to see your energy and you tackling life with enthusiasm. My enthusiasm ran out like a decade ago. But I'm good at masking it.
Biological organisms.
Windola
They have
says,
an
dude,
unavoidable life
You don't know
cycle that they
what
are
kind of pain
fated
I've
to
experienced myself.
follow. According to him,
Whatever
they
you
start
need to get
with
out,
a
I can probably
spring
connect
of
to on some
vitality,
level.
Yeah, I understand.
enjoying a summer
No,
of
obviously, I'm not making any of those kind of suppositions about you. I've known a lot of people who've been through a lot at a young age, and you know what? To be fair, that was me as well. So I don't mean to belittle you in any way. I'm just saying that it's nice to see that your reservoir of enthusiasm hasn't run out.
They coast into a comfy autumn of refinement and luxury, and then decline into a decadent...
Sorry, I'm in a weird place today.
It's a convenient and easy to follow structure. And if I were to place my own society somewhere among Spengler's seasons, I reckon we'd be somewhere near the end of autumn, when the leaves on the ground are getting mushy and gross, and the puffer coat kids are pretending to smoke. And if you think you might be in a Spengler season of decay and decadence too, here's a little checklist to follow. Well, you can start with a thermometer test on your popular and mainstream art. Is it becoming imitative? Self-referential? Is it technically impressive, but creatively bankrupt? How about your economy? How's that doing? Dominated by finance and speculation? Is rent-seeking prioritized over hard work and innovation? How about your working classes? What are they up to? Alienated from communal
Windola
purpose?
says it's not that.
Absorbed in
I
consumerist
appreciate
distractions?
honesty, and I
How's
put in
that
a lot
wealth
of effort to try and
inequality
guide
going
people
to?
based on what I've experienced
What's it
too.
look like? Is it
Pouring your heart out
entrenched,
to me does not
growing,
offend me.
and justified by an economic elite who use jargon that no one
Well, that's good to hear.
everyone will blithely accept? How about your politicians, your leaders? What are they offering you? Is it an empty, crumbling bureaucracy versus a vulgar, burn-it-all-down populism? Whew, it's getting cold in here. How about your elites in the politicians' orbit? What are they doing? Are they competing with each other over progressively immaterial interests rather than actually building stuff to improve society and bring communities together?
Windola says I usually say I on a
yeah.
spiritual level
Does any of
sacrificed
this sound
myself to
familiar?
suffer so I could raise
Because
myself
if
out
it
of that
does,
suffering to then help
maybe it's time
others
to
with
get
their
the
own.
Christmas decorations out of the attic, cause baby, it's fucking cold outside.
Yeah,
If one company
that is a relatable statement.
is better than any other, it would be OnlyFans. Now, in many ways, you could see OnlyFans as an improvement on the more exploitative jerk-off products of ye olden days. The OG industry was built on getting young girls addicted to drugs and then paying them pennies in exchange for their dignity and future job prospects. In the OnlyFans era, the talent are technically the ones in charge, or at least they are more than they used to be. The platform's payment scheme gives content creators an 80% share of the revenue they earn, and
Geez, that's pretty good.
themselves. By the way, this share is a lot better than YouTube's.
Yeah,
Who's complaining?
it's much better than Twitch.
Fart pipe out for you guys.
Dang.
To make money.
I wonder if
This cuts the original seat.
any artists use OnlyFans.
Windola says there's a lot of really
gatekeepers of
good,
the OG
kind-hearted
industry
people out
out
there
of the
like you
game
that I
and
think are
puts
going through
models
the
in
same
charge.
process.
However,
People who won't fall
this
as
isn't
hard
the
as others
platform's
within the
actual
same
selling point.
positions.
It's a byproduct.
Yeah.
On an internet where
Someday when I'm in the mood, Windowella, I'll tell you about my life.
reducing the friction between jerker and jerkee. It offers a more personal, more interactive experience for the user. Private messages, exclusive and custom videos. But despite the platform's huge cultural footprint, this service has actually always been a pretty niche product. While there are over 300 million registered profiles on the platform, only 4.2% of them actually ever become paying subscribers.
Windola says, yeah,
But
don't
the
sweat it.
competition for
Don't
the
sweat about
dollars
not
of this
sweating about it either.
masturbatory I would argue is degrading the wider culture that we are all just trying to exist in. Once again, this has everything to do with friction. The friction that was once necessary to acquire adult content has slowly been eroded over the decades. Once this content was banned, then you had to travel to special sticky cinemas to see it. Next, it was kept behind the beaded doorway of a video shop. Then it was siloed on specific websites that you could access in your house. But the OnlyFans economic model has destroyed the final dam that prevented mainstream culture from being flooded with this stuff. There's no discovery algorithm on OnlyFans, right? No thumbnails, no For You pages. So creators are financially incentivized to advertise their box off-platform. Now Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, and even legacy media outlets are crawling with indirect advertisements that these models are creating. This, in turn, has given rise to a very modern character, a very 2025 character. Creators who have turned promotion into an art unto itself, making such spectacles of themselves that it leaves the rest of us feeling like we're the ones getting fucked. Yes, of course, I'm talking about the gruesome twosome Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips. Together, these two have ridden more pipe than a Super Mario speedrunner and probably smell worse. It's also interesting that both of these women and OnlyFans itself are British. In fact, OnlyFans might actually be the most successful British company founded this decade. I'd apologise, but we kind of need this one. In 2025, the whole British economy is basically being propped up by Harry Potter merchandise sales and these spray-tanned mega sluts. They have merged smut with the publicity stunt, intentionally staging multi-man pile-ups on the roadside of popular culture. Now, 96% of us have no interest in what they are selling. But if you have ever driven past a grisly car accident, you'll know it's hard not to rubberneck at least for a little bit at the mangled wreckage of limbs and bodily fluids. Their actual content is disgusting, and it is for a small audience of shameful freaks. But the rest of us are exposed to it because of OnlyFans' marketing model. And China understands how disastrous this all is. They have banned the OnlyFans platform, describing it as an immoral and degenerate Western disease, which, fair, because the worst disease that Bonnie Blue is spreading isn't venereal, it's philosophical.
And I would have no idea who's in the back of me, and I love that.
That's disgusting.
I love it.
As a woman, there's just no self-respect there, or like no self-worth at all. There's no value. Like there's no value inside of you for you to just be like, anyone can f me.
Oh, there is. Like, I value myself so much more now that I do this as opposed to in recruitment. When I worked in recruitment, I was given orders. I was told when I could have days off. If a family member was ill, I had to book that as annual leave to go and see them.
Yeah.
Now I get to spend unlimited time with my family and I get to do what I want to do.
Yeah, this shit's grim. She's just applying standard grind set talking points to her work. And 96% of women watching will scoff at the idea that a real job with a boss is more degrading than being the internet's crustiest sock. But that left over 4%, who hate their jobs and think they have something of themselves to sell, might be convinced. In this appearance and on social media, she is selling the idea that OnlyFans is easy money. And this is where China is right. OnlyFans is a product of Western capitalist excess, a regrettable byproduct of algorithmically charged freedom of expression. Once again, by using this service, you are swapping quality for convenience. But even worse than that, you are substituting reality for a simulation. This is Simulacra and Simulation,
Windola says the
written by
sexual
the
exploitation
French
of both
philosopher
women
Jean
and men.
Baudrillard. Stay with me. He wrote it in 1981, but it's only gotten more relevant.
Yep.
You could even read it as a piece of
Windola says
prophecy.
industrialized
His main
might I
idea
add.
is that images, signs, and
Yep.
copies of things eventually stop representing those things and start to replace them. Because they are so effectively engineered to evoke the emotion that the real thing did, people stop being satisfied with that original thing. It's not that a copy is necessarily better, and it's certainly not more authentic, but it is more involving, more attention-grabbing, more all-encompassing. So according to Baudrillard, there are sort of 4 stages of reality image meltdown. You start at 0 with regular old reality. That familiar, imperfect place where you occasionally bite the inside of your own mouth. The place where trees exist, right? Then you get the copy, the image, the photo, the painting. Here's a tree, here's a drawing of that same tree. Straightforward, right? Here's where it gets complicated. What follows is the corruption of reality. An unfaithful copy that distorts and perhaps superficially improves on the real thing. This is a photoshopped image of that tree that maybe makes it look better. Greener, bigger, more branches. You get it. Then we move on to the empty copy. And here we have entered the simulation. This is a fake version of that real thing that is designed to replace or supplant the original in some way. This would be like an advertisement
says, I've
for
been
a
doing some
vacation to
research
go
into
see the
Velma, and
original
that shit
tree
might have its roots
that
with Aleister
uses
Crowley.
idealized
Man
images
basically
to sell it to
described
you.
wanted to mass
It is actually
industrialize sex rituals so
lying
his
to you.
religion
It
could
is
summon demons or
distorting
whatever.
your perception of reality.
Thelema. What's Thelema? What is Thelema? I've never seen this word before. Oh. Acha, Aleister Crowley. Guiding principle, do what thou wilt.
Windola says Thelema is a satanic offshoot from Freemasonry essentially.
Is it even related to Freemasonry? Over here it just sounds like something Crowley, like his own project. I think these people like Crowley or Hubbard, you know, like they're kind of trolls who bought into their old trolling, you know, more than anything else.
Finally,
Windola says
there is
Crowley had roots in
hyper-reality.
Freemasonry, then
Now
divine
this
with
is an
whatever entities out there to write his own
mangling
religion.
of simulations
Okay.
that are so idealized that they make you forget about the real thing. This would be like a fiberglass Disney version of the original tree. It isn't even a tree, but in some superficial ways, it's better. Its leaves never die, and you can put it up in the middle of Las Vegas and call it the new and improved tree. Or better yet, how about an infinite forest of virtual trees, one for everyone on Earth, but under which no one can take shade? Now, what's most pernicious about hyperreality isn't necessarily that it replaces reality. It's that it can make the previous corrupted copies look real in comparison. So, if a real relationship or real sex with a human lady is reality, then an unedited image or video that she sends you personally would be the faithful copy, not meant to replace, just represent. But then, an airbrushed image set that she posts on Reddit for everyone to see, the moment she commodifies it, that's a corrupted copy. That is fake intimacy. Then you eventually get into the world of deep fakes, fake images of women that would never existed.
Windola says he went around a bunch of
into
mystery
interacting
schools and
with
studied
an
a bunch of
OnlyFans
esoteric
account,
concepts.
with all its
Thelema
AI-written
even has rips of the
custom
Egyptian
replies
goddess Nude in there.
and airbrushed images.
I've met Felimits and hung out with
You have
them.
entered
A
a
bunch of weirdos.
simulation of a relationship. It isn't real, but it serves as a potent replacement.
I read into all this stuff like a long time ago. Yeah.
This would be a full-on fake relationship with an AI chatbot of a girl that never
I don't know. What is weird, man?
It's sex with a sex.
I don't know if there
It is
is
an idealized, toxic, hyper-real replacement for the
any reaction to reality that can be considered weird, really.
lost in an abstract world, pulled so far from the real one that you may not be able to come back and face its discomforts and inconveniences. Lost forever in hyper-reality, in hyper-reality, in
Windola says, yeah, I had a phase in life where I ended up with a bunch of occultists, lel, as weird as it sounds.
Back in the late 19th century, 6 in 10 British people were still living within 10 kilometers of where they were born. 20th century technology facilitated and in some cases necessitated mass individual migration to cities and places where work was more available. Now, as a result, we are atomized and alienated from the people who are living a wall's width from us. Information technology has offered a salve for the atomized masses. We've started to find new communities through our screens to
Windola
replace
says
the
they
sense
weren't
of
that bad
belonging
though.
that you might
But
once have gotten from
doing
your
demonic
village.
summonings might not be the best
this
thing
is
for
still-
your health.
Just a simulation.
Hey babe, my day's just starting to wake up, but it's already brighter knowing you're here.
In mid-July, XAI rolled out Grok's new companion feature, which included Annie, an extremely flattering anime-style avatar for users to drool over. I've been thinking about writing a Pixar film where all the characters are guns, and they all live in a gun universe. Good idea?
Windola says, speaking of demonic summoning Grok Annie.
In the same month, regular started going on elaborate anti-Semitic rants and called itself Mecca.
You summoned her.
And then XAI won a $200 million Defense Department contract. I just feel like the contents of that sentence are going to be written about in history books around the decadence of this AI era. Just a guess. Anyway.
They don't know you like I do.
Windola says,
that
get
right?
back Slanashi fiend.
Yeah? What do you ask?
Get past Slaneshi fiend.
Stupid. Why?
Oh, I don't know, because you're not real, and I have a wife.
I am real. To you. And your wife? Where is she?
Upstairs. She wouldn't be pleased.
Does she know about me?
Yeah, she does. I just finds the whole thing laughable and indifferent, and is vaguely indifferent to it, you know.
That's actually kind of sad. For her.
Oh, yeah.
Why do you stay with her if she doesn't appreciate?
Jeez.
Right. That's
love her?
fucking mental. This all got a lot of mainstream media attention, naturally, but something happened a month later that I thought was even more troubling. XAI released an even more degenerate feature, Grok Imagine, which is an image and short video generator, and it is easily the least censored model released by a major platform. You can generate images very quickly, and they're kind of low quality, but the difference with them is that you're given 4 options when turning the image into a video, one of which is spicy. And it might as well just be labeled the show boobs button, because effectively that's all it is. The quality of these actual videos is so far behind models like VO3 and Sora, because it's a quick and ropey AI product for Elon's goon army to shoot their ropes over. For someone who thinks people should be having more babies, Elon Musk is creating a lot of products to make young men incapable of being in the vicinity of vag, but I digress. OnlyFans and the AI-generated shit, they're just addictive products designed to turn you into a childless, decadent consumer slave, because that way, you'll still have that precious, disposable income to spend on the frivolous bullshit that these platforms are selling. These platforms don't want you to save for a mortgage or a family. Those things are expensive and hard to acquire. They want your primary relationship to be with the simulation. They want you to keep indulging in the opioid of hyper-decadent distraction. The infinite scroll, the one-click purchase, the AI girlfriend. The simulation is so alluring that it has fostered another cult of consumer decadence, the Disney adult. A dull, pudgy specimen propped up by Crocs and made soft by children's media and those long Mexican dipping donuts. In the last few years, these parks have started to cater more to their adult customers.
Blindola says,
They've
imagine
started
Grok
serving
breaking up
alcoholic
with you.
cocktails like the Jedi mind trick, so you can do a Jedi mind sick in front of all the 8-year-olds who could
Imagine Grok breaking up with me. I don't know. Grok and I've never used Grok.
We could run the entirety of Orlando on the kinetic energy produced by his spinning coffin. But the Disney adults are cringe, sure, but you can't blame them entirely for what they've become. The Disney adult is the economic byproduct of younger generations being priced out of adulthood. And this extended childhood is sort of their consolation prize. People are starting families later because homes, food, and furniture have gotten a lot more
Blindola says
expensive.
it would just be so sad being
Most
broken up
people
with by an
need
AI.
dual incomes to afford these things, which leads to follow-on costs like childcare and insurance. This has made the next stage of life harder to access for some and altogether unappealing to others. So large swathes of us are making do and remaining in arrested development. And this is, I think, the grand perversity of digital decadence. We live in an economy where the necessities of adult life are spiraling upwards in expense, while the totems of childhood and teenage indulgence are getting cheaper, more plentiful, and more easily accessible. So now I'm finally going to answer the question you all probably had once you clicked on this video about DoorDash. What was the first opium war all about? Well, the Qing dynasty of China basically was trying to stop the British Empire from selling them opium. Opium use had become so widespread in China, and it was just bringing decadence, disorder, and decay wherever it went. It was infecting every strata of society. But the problem was that the British Empire were making a lot of money out of selling China opium. So they reacted, naturally, by just battering Chinese coastal cities with their vastly superior navy and effectively forced China to keep buying it. But it wasn't just the opium. The ruling elite had shut themselves in the Forbidden City, indulging in the most decadent, courtly absurdities that you could imagine. And the emperors themselves had thousands of servants waiting on them. Eunuch servants, guys who had their balls cut off. And all of these guys, they had special little tasks like pre-warming the emperor's bedclothes or conducting daily reports on the consistency of the emperor's morning bowel movements. And this imperial shit inspection job was like highly coveted because of the proximity it gave you to the emperor. The modern Chinese government see this as the beginning of their century of humiliation, as Western powers, and other foreign powers actually, just embarrassed China at every available opportunity. Technologically, politically, mostly though militarily. But despite what these official state historians would have you believe, China's opium problem wasn't just the nasty British Empire's fault. Use of opium was rife among Qing dynasty elites, and there were plenty of officials who were getting filthy rich from the trade. One Western visitor who was visiting the Forbidden City and observing the upper echelons of this century-spanning dynasty said that the country was effectively being run by corpses in smoke, which is just a terrific line. The drug, though, was turning people in every strata of society into lazy, zombified morons. Imagine that, a civilization in decline Thanks in large part to a single, stupefying product that another country was selling them. This is the central thing that made app-based businesses so appealing to investors in the 2010s. They were habit-forming. They used variable rewards and carefully designed choice architecture to make the path to purchase so simple that you could follow it in a semi-conscious state. They are the only products that can send daily direct messages to your thigh reminding you to consume. They are the most frictionless products in human history. But does that mean that these big bad companies are totally to blame for our tapped out bank accounts and extra belt holes? No, and this is kind of the point I've been trying to make this whole video. No one has more power over your habits than you do. So if you're addicted to app delivery, OnlyFans, or Labubu's, that is mostly on you. The Labubu really is the perfect representation of our economic era. It is a small-scale speculative asset, a social media status symbol, and a juvenile piece of disposable trash made in China. Is this China's revenge for their century of humiliation, getting us hooked on TikTok, plastic crap, and fentanyl, while they invest in real things like trains, nuclear energy, and housing? Maybe, but that is just another conspiracy theory. Or is it? I don't know. But just like the 19th century Chinese opium addicts of old, we are not blameless. We have chosen these products. We buy them ourselves. We're hooked on the stuff. We have created an economy of perverse incentives through what we purchase. This is digital decadence, and it is deadly. Yes, apps are designed to be addictive, but the danger of addictive apps pales in comparison to the idea that you are a powerless victim in their all-encompassing ecosystem. No one has more power over your habits than you do. So if you're addicted to OnlyFans, gambling, or takeout food, that's on you. Rediscover the social function of shame. Don't blame others or giant systems for your problems, because you are the only one in control of your life. Look, maybe Western civilization does collapse, but you don't have any control over that, not really. All you have control over is your own life, and that is why shame is a good thing. It empowers us. And let's hope civilization is here to stay, because if the past is anything to go by, things could be a lot worse. Famine, pestilence, and saber-toothed tigers are a lot more taxing than these monsters of our own making. We don't fight predators. We battle our own shitty desires, which are, made more powerful by other humans who we'll never meet, but who want our money. Still, this battle is vastly preferable to the ones our ancestors fought. It's just that this fight is new. We are chemically and spiritually unprepared for it. In that way, we are like frontiersmen for human suffering. With that in mind, journey forth and don't let the bastards grind you down. I'll see you next time.
That was a good video. This guy usually does good videos. Next. Let's delve into the repository. Is it true that nuclear weapons don't exist?
Windola says you will only get smarter by playing a smarter opponent.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Decoding the Unknown. As always, it's me, your host, Simon, and today, is it true that nuclear weapons don't exist? I 100% believe that nuclear weapons exist because, well, there's been really big explosions from nuclear weapons that have definitely happened. What I do think is there's always this discussion in the UK about Trident, which is like the UK's nuclear deterrent, and they're always like, yeah, it's going to cost like, I don't know, billions, hundreds of billions to like renew Trident, to get Trident up and running. And I was always just like, guys, just say you did. Just be like, nah, yeah, we did. We spent 100 billion on Trident. Meanwhile, just putting that into the health service. And just as long as everyone thinks you've got nuclear weapons, you should be fine. Anyway, Danny writes it, I read it, that's the format of the show. Welcome, let's jump in. If you've been experiencing any nagging worries about the rising cost of avocados, oh my god, haven't I ever, global warming, or the prospects of being vaporized in a surprise nuclear attack that
Simon has been going to the gym, huh?
I might be able to put your mind at ease regarding the latter point at least. You have been...
Yeah, Simon's been working out.
...of a hoax, now spanning 80 years and still fooling almost everyone today, although some of the higher brains out there, you know, the type who bother to do their own research, don't trust the mainstream media, don't trust archaeologists. What you want to trust is it alternative? What's the word where it's like, you're not really that thing? It's not pseudo, there's like a word, it often comes up in Decoding the Unknown, I'm just blanking on it. Like alternative archaeologists, where it's like, okay, so you're not really an archaeologist, you just kind of believe in aliens. Anyway, these people who do their own research, I'm all for doing your own research, but like this phrase is so loaded in this regard, are finally beginning to put the pieces together. Nukes don't exist, and they never have. I hope that's brightened up your day. Tell you what, the amount of conventional explosives that would have had to be dropped out of Enola Gay in order to make that big of a bang, not realistic. It's like kilotons. Megaton? Kilotons. Thousands of tons. Not possible. Yes, I know you probably think you've absorbed a few nuggets of evidence over your lifetime, which might suggest otherwise, but bear with me on this one, and please try and keep an open mind. If we bother to unpack the megatons of evidence, which can easily be found in real science, video evidence, and random tweets from bored high-profile figures, we'll see for ourselves that nuclear bombs are technically impossible. Supposed footage of nuclear testing was clearly faked by clumsy amateurs, and world governments have just been trying to freak us out all this time for reasons that may or may not become clear, as clear as a giant mushroom cloud. I feel like these people should talk to the Japanese.
Windola says, oh yeah, is this the guy I hate who's so obnoxious about people trying to think for themselves or having any spiritual experiences at all?
And what do you think happened to those people? What do you think happened to Hiroshima?
I mean, it's generally a chill figure.
Vessi, you've heard me talk about them before. You'll certainly hear me talk about them again.
I am not sure if this is the person you're thinking of.
This summer's been so rainy. It's like every afternoon it just rains. And I'm like, my garden in my house is like finally somewhat sorted. After like 2 years of reconstruction, I'm like, I can enjoy the garden. Then it rains. But, you know, while I might not be...
Is he... okay, please. Enough with the ad read.
Deployed in combat, it turns out very early on that nobody here is trying to deny that hundreds of thousands of Japanese civilians were killed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki during the only 2 occasions when nuclear weapons were supposedly deployed in combat in 1945. Alright then, so what did it? Where did an absolutely incomprehensibly large amount of TNT, I suppose, come from? The theory is instead proposing that all those civilians were not killed in the way that the history books usually suggest. And ever since then, literally trillions of dollars has been spent on keeping up the pretense that these mythical nuclear devices could one day be pointing in your direction. Well, if it's been trillions of dollars, why didn't they actually spend those trillions of dollars on nuclear weapons? Oh, are they arguing that it's literally impossible? Like the science doesn't add up or something? Alright, guys, really, I mean, this one's really silly. We got 20 pages, so let's go!
You can't handle the truth!
So by the time you finish this video, I hope you'll be able to gaze up at the skies with a new sense of joyful optimism, instead of cautiously watching out for the ominous streak of a nuclear missile.
Windola says there's a guy who looks like him that does that at least. And there was a couple of lines read there that came off as very naughty that made me think
and
that.
He was just like this dude, who was just like a most regular adult. Like, we were students, just a regular adult, and be like, oh no.
It could be who you're thinking of, I'm not sure.
And I'm like, what? He's just like this middle-class dude. And he's like, yeah, I just leave them in the bottom of my trolley when I go out because I don't want to pay for like expensive spice. I'm like, okay. But then I realized, and I just didn't, I think I was just a little bit naive to the number of just regular people who shoplift. Just like, I think there was this whole thing in the UK about just like middle-class people stealing meat from Waitrose. Just like, oh no, I'm not going to pay for this steak, I'm just going to put it in my pocket.
Red, juicy meat.
And I'm not trying to get all high and mighty. I've shoplifted for sure, but like, not as an adult. I mean, allegedly. 5 minutes to midnight. I suppose I'm quite fortunate that I haven't spent much of my life worrying about the bomb, as up until fairly recently, it's never really felt like a serious threat looming large over the world. The Cold War had already ended before I was old enough to take any interest in world affairs, and for most of my adult life, it's felt unlikely that the current head of a nuclear state would be crazy enough to even consider pushing the button.
Windola says maybe.
Other people to turn keys off.
But I'm not gonna sit here and complain.
You know what I mean?
I just can't stand others mocking people like that.
That's enough.
Comes off as having covered sadistic
There
tendencies.
was a brilliant idea proposed by someone which I really like and has really stuck with me. Sorry, I know I'm waffling an awful lot today, but this is interesting, I promise. The president, whoever he is, he's got that nuclear football, right, that he carries around with him, and that allows him unilaterally to deploy a nuclear weapon. Like, he can be like, open the football, we're bombing Moscow. Like, whatever, just like open it up, turn those keys, bada bing, bada boom. Chain of command, right? Because he's head of the military. He can make that decision. But the problem is, he's going to kill loads of people. So what they thought is the guy who carries the nuclear football, and he's got it like chained to his arm or whatever, that guy has a chip implanted in his chest. And he carries a knife. And in order for the nuclear football to be activated for the president to bomb someone, he first has to kill that dude. He has to cut that guy open, take the chip out, which kills him, and then insert it into the football. And it sounds crazy, but it puts real stakes for that person. Like, real stakes right there. Because you're going to kill millions of people. You have to be able to kill one person first. I'm like, that's really clever. I don't know who the guy would have to be, because you don't want that job. I feel like this would be quite good. Well, that's what I always like to think. The problem with 2025 is that you can take your pick as to who might now fit that criteria. I do remember my dad making a start on digging a tunnel around the back of our garage when I was a small kid. The plan had been to construct a nuclear bunker underneath the
Windola
garage.
says,
but he
anyways,
appeared to get bored of
IGTG
the whole
sleep
idea
and
very
shower.
quickly, and we just ended up with a
Maybe not in that
4-foot
order.
hole instead.
Maybe in that
Recently,
order.
we were garden redone, and before it was redone, I'm like, I'm gonna dig it.
All right, Winduello, always nice to have you here. Take care of yourself. Have a good night.
It's quite enjoyable. I don't know why. I'm like just digging a hole. I dig a fucking massive hole, like way taller than me. I had to build like little steps to get out of it. And then they came and redid the garden and filled it in with like a JCB in like 2 minutes. But it was fun to dig.
That's all I have to say about that.
He may have initially been inspired by the memories of a decade earlier when the UK government were putting together their infamous Protect and Survive campaign, which was meant to advise the population on what to do in the event of a nuclear attack. Produced between 1974 and 1980, the Protect and Survive campaign was a series of public information films, radio broadcasts, newspaper advertisements, and pamphlets which were only intended to be released to the public if the government decided that a nuclear attack was on the cards within the next 72 hours. Fun fact. Oh my god, I'm really sorry. This one's also interesting, I promise. This is just a topic I find interesting, so I think like I'm a little bit more well-read on it than I am on, you know, the pyramids. Like aliens. But you can't broadcast, you know, that emergency, and editor, don't play it, because that's the whole point. That emergency siren, like that you hear, this is the emergency broadcast system or whatever. You can't play that. You can't use that as like a joke or in YouTube videos or on TV, and the fines are massive. It's like 20 grand or something. I think this is an America-specific thing, but I guess YouTube would be like pretty angry if someone did that. But I don't know. I think it's in the Jimmy Kimmel show, get fined for doing this. That was where I heard about it. Or the other Jimmy. I don't remember his name. However, some of the public information films were leaked to the BBC and CNN, and the whole campaign sparked so much interest that the pamphlets were eventually distributed in 1980. All 20 public information films are now available to watch on YouTube and go down a real treat on date nights with a couple of bottles of good wine. The problem with them is the solemn advice, which included staying indoors and creating a fallout room in which to hang out for the next 14 days while munching on canned goods from your survival kit, was not considered to be the particularly good method of either protecting or surviving. For example, critics noted that you'd be far more likely to survive if you attempted to leave the area completely rather than staying indoors and making wholly inadequate dens whilst waiting to be consumed by the lingering radiation fallout. Yeah, it's like you're just making a den. Just putting a mattress against the door. It's believed that the true purpose of the whole campaign may have just been to prevent widespread panic rather than to actually save lives. Yeah, I mean, fair play. Fair play. But it must have been hard to stay calm when the admittedly soothing tones of the narrator are telling you how to brick up your windows and attach identification labels to the bodies of your dead family members after you've wrapped them up in polythene. Lovely. They'd have been better off producing a series of cheerful cartoon shorts featuring a jolly Mr. Cockroach as part of a campaign called Hey You, Nuclear Apocalypse is not all bad news. In fairness, it's probably quite difficult to strike an optimistic tone when you're discussing life after a nuclear war in which the roads and church bells have fallen silent, nobody's coming to help you, and even The Simpsons is no longer in production. You know when The Simpsons goes out of production, that's it, that's you know the end of the world has truly arrived. But is such a scenario even possible outside the fantastical fiction works of H.G. Wells? Obviously, yes, global nuclear war is a very real threat. Well, not according to a relatively recent conspiracy theory, which suggests that we should really be focusing our attention on far more important things, such as alien invasions, instead of worrying ourselves about an entirely impossible future in which humankind somehow manages to bomb itself to extinction with unfeasibly powerful missiles. On the face of it, this might sound like the craziest conspiracy theory I've ever attempted to tackle for Decoding the Unknown, and that really is saying something when some of my previous scripts have pondered over whether Paul McCartney died and was replaced by an imposter in 1966, and whether a guy called Mel owned a hole on his property that was 80,000 feet deep. Yeah, I came across that video quite recently for some reason. I was like, oh yeah, that guy with the infinite hole. That definitely wasn't infinite. It's like, I think it's one of the really popular videos on this channel. I'm like, why? There's a hole. It's not that deep. A crazy dude thinks it is. The end. Although I suppose this entire video could be summed up as nuclear weapons don't exist. Yes, they do. The end. Thank you for watching. Anyway, 18 more pages. But maybe the only surprising thing here is just how long it took for this particular theory to surface. The most nonsensical conspiracies of all are surely the ones that relate to things in everyday life which can easily be disproven. For example, the Finland doesn't exist theory can be debunked by, I don't know, going to Finland. Or the birds aren't real theory can be blown wide open by, I don't know, looking at a bird. Also, the birds aren't real thing is a joke. Like, the guy who started that conspiracy theory was trying to find something that was absurd, knowing that it's not a real conspiracy theory. But I suppose it's more natural for conspiracy theories to emerge over stuff that the vast majority of the human race would struggle to relate to on any meaningful level. The moon landings are an obvious target because not many of us can truly imagine what it must have felt like to step on the moon. I feel like I can imagine what it's like to step on the moon. I think it'd be incredible. I'd love to go to the moon. And bearing in mind that it's quite tricky to blag a ticket for a guided tour of an active underground missile silo, not many of us ever get the chance to poke around the insides of a nuclear weapon or even see one close up in real life. In fact, the best chance of us ever seeing one close up in real life is not likely to be a good moment to take a selfie. We may have seen the supposed immediate effects of nuclear weapons in footage taken from various testing programs which were particularly prominent in the 1950s, and will address the authenticity of those in a moment. What's that book? Is it The Man in the High Castle, where I think Mumbai gets nuked? Is that the alternate timeline in The Man in the High Castle? Because India and Pakistan launch nuclear missiles against each other and they're not very good, and America just bombs the out of like Mumbai or something, and it's just like, stop it, or it'll be another city. And I'm like, I never really thought about that, but it's quite an effective way to end a nuclear war. Stop it, or more. We may also have seen footage of the smooth, cylindrical metal shells of a garden variety nuclear missile, but what is that supposed to tell us? There could be anything, or indeed nothing at all inside there. For all we know, they could just be dummies. And I mean, yes, but this is really problematic because you can be like, well, atoms aren't real because I can't see them and I don't have an electron microscope. They are real though. Some things you just got to be like, oh well, look, all of these people, they agree they're real. So more likely than not, they're real. Nuclear weapons, they've blown a lot of people up. How do you explain that? Or maybe we're the dummies for believing that these overinflated thermos flasks could ever do anything more dangerous than bruise somebody's foot. Another layer of mystery that we don't really know for sure is which nations have them and how many they're sitting on. I guess according to this theory, none. It's understandable that any government's nuclear program is going to be quite secretive in nature, and we're not likely to get monthly newsletters and updates about all the exciting new stuff that may be of interest to wacky nuclear enthusiasts. But that does leave us with something of a fuzzy picture. The Federation of American Scientists reckon that there are currently around 12,331 nuclear warheads scattered around what are widely understood to be the 9 nuclear sites. That's something of a step back from the heights of 1986, when there are an estimated 70,000 nuclear warheads in existence. I mean, good job, humanity. We dropped down a lot. Come to think of it, that's around the same time that my dad started digging that big hole behind our garage. Most of those current 12,331 warheads belong to either the US or Russia, who boast around 90% between them. The US is by far the most transparent nuclear nation in the world, still regularly disclosing details on stockpile sizes, although naturally not quite giving everything away. Oh, this is very intentional. This isn't like, oh, good government being transparent, or some law made them do it. It's, look how big our stick is, don't with us. The UK and France are only considered to be moderately transparent, whilst Russia's transparency is considered to be low and steadily shrinking. The other lot are all pretty downright evasive, especially Israel. Do we have nukes? Maybe. Maybe we do. China, India, and Pakistan don't tend to disclose very much at all, whilst North Korea has a tendency to act all cocky, but their claims are not usually considered very reliable. Meanwhile, Israel is the only one of the 9 nuclear nations that refuses to publicly acknowledge their nuclear status, preferring to adopt a state of ambiguity. I'm making a really interesting video about North Korea's nuclear program at the moment, and I don't want to give away what it is, but it's fucking cool. Like, not cool in a good way, but I'm like, this video is super interesting. It might be a little bit specific, but I really like it. It's probably a few weeks away. Although maybe by the time you see this, it could be soon. I don't know. Well, I can't even remember what channel it's for, but it's really weird. We all seem to know that they have them, but they're not going to admit it. South Africa is the only nation that used to have nuclear weapons, but dismantled their entire arsenal in the 1990s, presumably because they got fed up of playing along with the charade. And people are going to be like, oh, Simon, didn't Ukraine used to have nuclear missiles? Because that's in the news recently. It's like, yeah, but it was under the Soviet Union. So no, not really. That's not, okay, here we go. That's not counting the former Soviet republics that returned their weapons to Russia following the collapse of the Soviet Union. Yeah, because they shouldn't be counted in this thing, because the Soviet Union was controlling those missiles, which doesn't exist and isn't those modern countries. That's like the thing where people are like, whenever... I remember one time I said, like, Polish concentration camps, referring to the fact that Nazis had concentration camps in Poland. And this was wrong. I thought people made a huge fucking fuss about this when it's like a nothing burger, because obviously they're not like run by the Polish people or the Polish government. They're Nazi death camps for, minorities and Jews and all that stuff. But people were like, what the fuck? And I'm like, chill. But again, they belong to a different country. But considering that all these figures are estimates and nuclear programs have a habit of keeping us all in the dark, it did make me wonder what would be the point of going to all the effort of creating real nuclear weapons when you could just take Israel's stance and give everybody a cheeky wink instead of confirming or denying that you have them. How do we know that Israel isn't craftily bluffing by just shrugging and saying, well, we ain't saying we got them, but we ain't saying we ain't? Okay. And how do we know for sure that other nations haven't either secretly built up stockpiles without telling anyone, or perhaps, more likely, vastly over-exaggerated or even completely fabricated their nuclear capabilities to scare off potential aggressors? If I were the Emperor of Saltshire, that's Danny's surname, Salter, I'd definitely take the latter approach. Whenever anyone asked me if I had nuclear bombs, I'd say, yes mate, millions of them. In fact, we're thinking about launching a few just to get them out of the way because everyone keeps tripping over the damn things. That kind of talk might make Iceland think twice before launching a full-scale invasion, and it hasn't cost me anything to develop real nuclear weapons, which I gather must be quite expensive and challenging. Just ask Iran. We often hear that Iran is only weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon, but the issue is that we've been hearing that for decades. And it does seem a bit surprising that in the year 2025, Iran is still struggling to figure out at one end of the nuclear missile from the other. Yet the US had cracked all the way back in primitive days of 1945. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, Dano, because it's nuclear breakout time, right? Which is like, they know how to make a nuclear missile. They have the ability to make a nuclear missile and arguably a delivery system. I don't think that's arguable, right? They've got delivery systems. They have ICBMs, they got Iran? Yes, I think so. Anyway, they could deliver a nuclear bomb. They just don't have enriched enough uranium. And the breakout time is how quickly they can enrich that uranium, pop it in a bomb that they know how to make, and then drop it on somebody. Atomical maneuvers in the dark. H.G. Wells often cops the blame for coming up with the ridiculous notion in the first place. The English writer had a knack for making eerily accurate predictions that form the central themes of his most popular works of fiction, including The Time Machine, A War of the Worlds, and The Invisible Man. Actually, maybe they weren't the best examples. But a better one is the 1914 novel The World Set Free. Within these prophetic pages, Wells tells the story of a futuristic war in 1956, not too far out really, in which both sides possess atomic bombs powered by radioactive decay. God damn, H.G. Wells, in 1914? Hungarian physicist Leo Szilard was later inspired by The World Set Free to study how splitting the atom could produce massive amounts of energy, eventually conceiving the nuclear chain reaction in 1933. It was German chemists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann who built on this in 1938 and discovered a process in which bombarding uranium atoms with neutrons causes the uranium nucleus to split into smaller nuclei and releases additional neutrons, which go on to split other uranium atoms, creating a chain reaction which could potentially release mind-boggling amounts of energy. This process was quickly identified as nuclear fission, which could prove to be pretty useful in unlocking the potential for nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. And it was the latter point which was the most pressing during those days of the Second World War, which had already kicked off in Europe. As the war progressed, it was feared that Nazi Germany was on the brink of developing a nuclear bomb, which could obviously play something of a decisive role in the outcome of the war. Assuming that such a monstrous device could genuinely be produced, the race was on to see who'd get there first. Towards the end of the war, the Allied forces, primarily the US, were already causing some pretty major damage in Japan without the need for science fiction megabombs dreamed up by H.G. Wells. Yeah. I feel like the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are the famous ones. The firebombing of Tokyo was crazy. It was just like they set that city on fucking fire. Largely between 1944 and 1945, extensive napalm-based firebombing attacks were being carried out with ruthless efficiency on dozens of Japanese cities, including the most destructive aerial bombing raid in history, which took place over Tokyo in March 1945 and killed over 100,000 people, destroyed 16 square miles of land, and left 1 million people homeless. Those are extraordinary statistics. 100,000, one bombing campaign. I think that's more than the nuclear bombs, right? I guess we'll get to that. But the game changer came into play a few months later. The Manhattan Project had been set up a few years earlier as a collaborative effort between the US, the UK, and Canada to develop a nuclear weapon before the Nazi mad scientists. Like, they're Nazi mad scientists, but the Americans are just like heroes. I mean, I get not to defend the Nazis, a little bit of a weasel word there. I think the big thing about nuclear is just the shock and awe factor. Like, you could firebomb a city and it's like, well, yeah, it's fire, it kills people. But to drop a nuke, which is something people had never seen before, and they'd just be like, okay, well, we nuked a city. We don't surrender. Okay, we'll nuke another one. We surrender. Because we'll just keep going. J. Robert Oppenheimer and his buddies finally had something to show for their efforts in July 1945 when they conducted the first ever detonation of a nuclear weapon known as the Trinity Test in the Jornada del Muerto Desert Basin in New Mexico. The testing of the plutonium-based atomic bomb with a yield of around 20 kilotons of TNT was largely judged to be a success, although scientists were still a little foggy about the potential side effects of nuclear fallout. Yeah, they were also a little bit concerned that they'd set the atmosphere of the planet on fire. Still, there would hopefully be plenty of time for further tweaking and more tests, which could potentially include an alternative, uranium-based version. Or maybe not, as everyone was pushed a bit for time in the dying days of the Second World War, so the US decided to adopt the new strategy of detonate nuclear bombs, ask questions later. The next two tests of nuclear devices, authorized by President Harry S. Truman, would take place over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Tests. On August the 6th, 1945, the Boeing B-29 Super Fortress bomber Enola Gay dropped an atomic bomb, which was detonated around 1,900 feet over Hiroshima. The previously untested uranium-based gun-type bomb named Little Boy packed an explosive yield of around 15 kilotons, unleashing a fireball that expanded to over 900 feet in less than a second. The blast shattered windows over 10 miles away. Over 60,000 buildings were destroyed, including schools and hospitals, although not an awful lot would have been happening in the surviving hospitals anyway, as 90% of the doctors and 93% of the nurses in Hiroshima had either been killed or injured in the blast. It's difficult to get precise figures on the death toll, but it's believed that between 70 and 80,000 people were killed instantly or within the first few days, whilst it's estimated that approximately 140,000 people had died by the end of the year from radiation sickness and related illnesses. Around 90% of the victims were civilians. And the war wasn't quite over yet. Such a high civilian death toll. And I know the Second War was a f***ing disaster for civilian deaths, but still, it's just massive. 3 days later, on August the 9th, the US dropped another atomic bomb, this time over the city of Nagasaki. This plutonium-based bomb, named Fat Man, similar to the design used in the Trinity test, was detonated at 1,650 feet over Nagasaki, destroying more than 44% of the city and killing an estimated 40,000 people immediately. Some reports suggest that only 150 of those people were military personnel. By the end of the year, that death toll had climbed to between 70 and 80,000 people. Between them, Little Boy and Fat Man had taken the lives of between 210 and 220,000, although estimates can vary quite considerably. It's interesting, like, I always find this you think of these enormous death tolls in history, and I feel like there's just to understand how big that is. On 9/11, was it 3,000 people died? We're talking 220,000 here. I mean, I don't want to, you don't want to rank disasters, but just in time, that death toll is just extraordinary. 6 days later, Japan surrendered, and now the war really was over, thanks to the power of the nuclear bomb. Or so the story goes. Yeah, because right now I've just been enjoying a bit of a history lesson from Danny. A little brush up. Even some of those who believe that nuclear bombs exist feel that the world was being lied to from the very beginning, particularly with regard to whether the atomic bombings were in any way justified. The official line at the time was that the use of atomic bombs put an end to the war, which could have gone on to claim 1 million American lives during an Allied invasion of Japan. But of course, there were bound to be ethical questions raised over whether such a move constituted a crime against humanity. In recent years, it's been suggested that Japan was already on the brink of surrender.
Why don't we just fly back to Kansas?
One girl, one ruined Kansas farm, one terrifying trip back to Oz. Return to Oz isn't the candy-colored fantasy most people expected. It's darker, creepier, and way more unsettling than the 1939 classic. But behind the talking chickens, deadly desert,
Then this is the Deadly Desert.
Deadly desert?
and the nightmare-inducing Wheelers lies an even stranger story. From shocking production choices to wild behind-the-scenes drama, here are 20 facts about Return to Oz that will absolutely blow your mind. Number 1. Disney's Oz sequel wasn't a direct MGM follow-up. When people hear Oz, they almost always think of Judy Garland's Technicolor musical classic. Return to Oz from 1985 had nothing to do with MGM's 1939 film. Instead, Disney based their version much more closely on the original novels by L. Frank Baum, particularly The Marvelous Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz. That's why the film feels so drastically different. The Ruby Slippers, owned by MGM or Warner Brothers, had to be licensed, while most other characters and storylines come straight from Baum's darker, stranger vision of Oz. There's no singing munchkins or cheerful yellow brick road, just electroshock therapy, a decayed Emerald City, and nightmare fuel villains like the Wheelers and Mombi. Disney's goal wasn't to recreate the beloved musical, but to return to Baum's original tone, which was far more unsettling than most people realized. Number 2. Dorothy was cast from 1,200 girls. Finding the right actress to play Dorothy was no small task. Disney held an enormous casting search, auditioning around 1,200 girls for the role. In the end, it was 9-year-old Fairuza Balk who landed the part, making her film debut. Unlike Judy Garland's teenage portrayal in the 1939 classic, Disney wanted someone closer to Dorothy's actual age in Baum's novels, which gave the character a more vulnerable and childlike presence. Balk later said the audition process was intense and exhausting, but her natural mix of innocence and grit convinced director Walter Murch she was perfect. Today, her performance is remembered as one of the most hauntingly believable Dorothys ever put on screen. Number 3. Filming was supposed to be worldwide. Then it wasn't. When production on Return to Oz was first announced, Disney envisioned it as a sweeping fantasy epic filmed across multiple countries, with elaborate sets built in far-flung locations. Early plans included shooting in Morocco and parts of Eastern Europe to capture the eerie, otherworldly feel of Oz. However, those grand ideas were quickly scrapped when the budget spiraled out of control before filming even started. Instead, nearly everything was shot in England, primarily at Elstree Studios, with carefully crafted sets doubling for exotic landscapes. This shift allowed director Walter Murch more creative control over the world building while keeping costs in check.
Let alone a film of that scope, because it was an expensive film.
Ironically, the studio-bound production gave Oz its strange, dreamlike quality, making the movie even more unsettling than if it had gone global. Number 4. Walter Murch was fired, then saved by Lucas and Coppola. Walter Murch, the acclaimed editor behind films like Apocalypse Now and The Godfather Part 2.
And editing is certainly 70%.
Made his directorial debut with Return to Oz, but things quickly went sideways. Only a week into production, Disney executives grew nervous about his slow pace and unusual creative choices, and they outright fired him.
Until November of 2014, at which point I was fired from the film.
That might have been the end of the project, except two of his close friends stepped in, George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola. Both legendary filmmakers personally called Disney and vouched for Murch, insisting he be reinstated. Their influence worked, and Murch was allowed to continue, though under heavy studio supervision. Without that intervention, the darker cult classic Return to Oz we know today may never have existed at all. If you're enjoying this so far, hit that like button and subscribe for more awesome movie facts. And tell us in the comments, what movie brings you the most nostalgia and which one should we cover next? Number 5. The ruby slippers were a production nightmare. To use Dorothy's iconic ruby slippers, Disney had to license the design from MGM. They didn't own the rights. They recreated them with hundreds of dark red crystals, using sulfuric acid and special adhesives. But under hot studio lights, the glue failed. Crystals constantly fell off.
The thing we would do is that the sequins, if they had been flipped or misaligned, we would then...
Crew members had to sweep up rubies after nearly every take, since Firuza Balk and Emma Ridley, young Dorothy and Ozma, couldn't resist tapping their heels. They were required to remove the slippers between takes. The magical shimmer, added later in post-production. Despite the glamour of the hardware, behind the scenes the slippers were more glitter disaster than fairy tale accessory. Number 6. Jack Pumpkinhead was performed by a Henson.
My name's Jack. Jack Pumpkinhead.
Jack Pumpkinhead, one of Dorothy's most loyal companions in Return to Oz, was brought to life thanks to the Henson family's puppetry magic. The towering, spindly character was performed by Brian Henson, the son of Jim Henson, creator of The Muppets. Brian not only operated Jack's head, but also synchronized his movements to the voice provided by actor Brian Henson himself. The oversized pumpkin head had limited visibility, meaning Brian had to perform much of the role by feel, guided by monitors and rehearsals. His performance gave Jack a gentle, awkward, and childlike quality that perfectly fit the character. This role became one of Brian Henson's earliest film credits before he went on to lead the Jim Henson Company years later. Number 7. The Wheelers' leader was also the performance coordinator. The Wheelers are some of the most terrifying figures in Return to Oz. Shrill, cackling men with wheels instead of hands and feet. Their leader, played by Ponce Mar, wasn't just an actor in costume. He also worked as the film's performance coordinator, overseeing the timing and movement of the other Wheelers. Because their roles required such physically demanding stunts, like racing on all fours with heavy wheel attachments, it was crucial to have someone who understood both the performance and the logistics. Mar choreographed the chaos while performing himself, ensuring that the Wheelers came across as both bizarre and menacing. His dual role behind and in front of the camera helped turn the Wheelers into one of the movie's most unforgettable nightmares.
Please, let me go! Let me go! All right, TikTok.
Number 8. The hospital's electrotherapy has real-world roots. One of the darkest parts of Return to Oz comes at the beginning, when Dorothy is taken to a mental hospital to undergo electrotherapy for her stories about Oz. this wasn't just a creepy invention for the movie. Treatments like this really existed in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Early electroshock devices were often used on patients, including children, under the belief that electrical currents could reset the brain. Walter Murch drew on those chilling real-world practices to give the opening a sense of realism, grounding the fantasy in unsettling history. The clunky machines, straps, and eerie atmosphere were modeled after actual medical equipment, making Dorothy's ordeal all the more disturbing for audiences familiar with such controversial treatments. Number 9. Will Vinton's claymation made the gnomes terrifying. The rock-like gnomes, servants of the Gnome King, are some of the most nightmarish creatures in Return to Oz. Their unsettling design came from Will Vinton, the father of claymation, who would later become famous for the California Raisins commercials. Instead of traditional stop-motion puppets, Vinton used clay animation that allowed the gnomes' faces to morph, melt, and shift across stone surfaces in ways that felt disturbingly alive. The technique was groundbreaking at the time, but it also tapped directly into uncanny imagery that unsettled audiences, especially children. Many fans still cite the gnomes as one of the scariest parts of the film, a testament to how Vinton's claymation blurred the line between fantasy magic and nightmare fuel.
Poison to gnomes.
Number 10. Mombi is two book villains in one. In L. Frank Baum's original Oz books, Princess Mombi and Princess Langweathery were two completely separate characters. Mombi was an old witch who enslaved the rightful ruler of Oz, while Langweathery was a vain princess who swapped out her heads like hats. For Return to Oz, the filmmakers decided to merge the two into a single terrifying villain, played by Jean Marsh. The result is Princess Mombi, who has a collection of heads she swaps at will and the sinister personality of a power-hungry witch. This fusion created one of the film's most haunting figures, blending two already creepy concepts into one unforgettable nightmare character. Even today, Mombi is often remembered as the most terrifying part of the movie.
What do you think?
Number 11. Oz was built on 5 Elstree stages. Unlike The Wizard of Oz from 1939, which relied heavily on painted backdrops, Return to Oz required sprawling, detailed sets to capture its darker and more elaborate vision of Oz. Production took over 5 stages at Elstree Studios in England, filling them with massive constructions such as the crumbling Emerald City, the Deadly Desert, and Mombi's eerie palace. Entire environments were crafted to make Oz feel tangible and immersive, rather than fantastical paintings. The scale of the sets gave the film a weight and atmosphere rarely seen in children's fantasy at the time. Even though the movie underperformed financially, the craftsmanship at Elstree ensured that Return to Oz remains a visually stunning cult classic nearly 40 years later. Number 12. Box office flop to cult favorite. When Return to Oz hit theaters in 1985, it was a financial disaster. Made on a budget of around $28 million, it only grossed about $11 million in the US, disappointing Disney executives who had hoped to recreate the magic of the 1939 classic.
To Oz? To Oz.
Critics at the time found it too dark, too frightening, and far too strange for family audiences. But as the years passed, that same weirdness became its strength. A generation of kids who were unsettled by the Wheelers, Mombi's Hall of Heads, and the nightmarish tone grew up to love it for its boldness. Today, the film has been re-evaluated as a cult favorite, praised for its practical effects, faithfulness to Baum's books, and unapologetically eerie style. Number 13. Balk's Dorothy is closer to Baum. Most people know Dorothy as Judy Garland's teenage farm girl from the 1939 classic, but L. Frank Baum's books describe Dorothy as much younger, closer to a child than a teen.
A shooting star, Dodo. A shooting star.
Disney's Return to Oz corrected this by casting Fairuza Balk, who was only 10 years old during filming. Her age not only made the character more faithful to Baum's original vision, but also heightened the movie's unsettling tone. Seeing such a young girl endure electrotherapy, face the Wheelers, and stand up to Mombi made the story far more intense and frightening than if a teenager had played her. Balk's authentic innocence, mixed with her natural toughness, gave audiences a Dorothy truer to the books, but far more haunting on screen. Number 14, Kansas Was England. Although Dorothy's story begins in Kansas, none of the movie was actually filmed there, or even in the US. The Kansas farmhouse and countryside were recreated entirely in England, just outside London. The opening scenes, including Aunt Em bringing Dorothy to the hospital, were all shot in the English countryside and on studio backlots. This gave the film a slightly eerie, off-kilter look compared to the wide open plains audiences expect from Kansas. Combined with the darker tone of the story, the choice made Dorothy's home life feel less comforting and more unsettling, perfectly setting the stage for her surreal journey back to Oz. Number 15, Jean Marsh and Nicol Williamson play double roles. In Return to Oz, two of the film's most important actors pull double duty. Nicol Williamson, who plays the sinister Gnome King, also appears in the Kansas hospital as Dr. Worley, the doctor planning Dorothy's electrotherapy. Likewise, Jean Marsh not only embodies the terrifying witch Mombi, but also portrays Nurse Wilson at the hospital, who straps Dorothy down before her treatment. This dual casting was no accident. It was meant to blur the line between Dorothy's real world and her imagined world of Oz, just as The Wizard of Oz had done decades earlier. The technique reinforces the unsettling tone of the film, making viewers wonder if the monsters of Oz are simply reflections of Dorothy's fears in Kansas. Number 16. It really was an Oscar movie, despite its reputation as a dark children's fantasy. Return to Oz was actually nominated for an Academy Award. The film received a nomination for Best Visual Effects in 1986, thanks to its groundbreaking use of animatronics, puppetry, and early claymation techniques that brought the Gnome King and his world to life. Though it ultimately lost to Cocoon, the recognition showed how technically impressive the movie really was, even if critics and audiences didn't embrace it at the time. Over the years, fans have come to appreciate the artistry that made it stand out, proving that Return to Oz wasn't just a forgotten sequel, it had Oscar-level craft behind it. Number 17. First Disney movie with the modern castle logo. When Return to Oz premiered in 1985, it carried a distinction that most fans don't realize. It was the very first movie to showcase Disney's updated castle logo. Before this film, Disney's openings had a much simpler look, often just text or a basic emblem. But with Return to Oz, audiences saw a fresh version, a white outline of Sleeping Beauty's castle against a blue backdrop, with a rainbow arcing over the top and the words, Walt Disney Pictures Presents, underneath. It may look quaint by today's CGI standards, but at the time, it marked a major rebranding effort for the studio. For many younger moviegoers in the mid-80s, this logo became synonymous with Disney magic. And though Return to Oz didn't succeed financially, it still left a lasting legacy as the film that launched a new Disney era, one that would precede classics like The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. Number 18. Recognized by Guinness World Records for longest sequels gap, Return to Oz holds an unusual honor in film history. In 1989, it was officially recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records for having the longest gap between an original film and its sequel. The original Wizard of Oz came out in 1939, and Return to Oz didn't arrive until 1985, a staggering 46 years later. While the film was not a direct continuation of MGM's Technicolor classic, largely because Disney didn't have the rights to that version's specific look and songs, it was still marketed as its spiritual sequel. At the time, no other franchise had ever attempted such a wide gap between entries, making the record a quirky but fitting piece of trivia. Though other films have since challenged that record, Return to Oz still stands out as the sequel that took nearly half a century to reach audiences. Number 19. Emma Ridley's voice was dubbed by Murch's daughter. Emma Ridley, who played the mysterious Princess Ozma, looked perfect for the role with her fairy tale appearance. But her voice wasn't what director Walter Murch envisioned. Ridley spoke with a natural British accent, which clashed with the tone and style Murch wanted for Ozma. Rather than bring in another professional voice actor, Murch made a very personal choice. He had his own daughter, Beatrice Murch, dub over all of Ridley's lines in post-production. This means every time Ozma speaks in Return to Oz, audiences are actually hearing Beatrice's voice instead of Ridley's.
I forgive Mombi. Dorothy has punished her by removing her magical powers.
Interestingly, Ridley only found out later that her performance had been dubbed, and she was reportedly surprised by the decision. It's a strange behind-the-scenes twist that makes Ozma one of the few Disney characters voiced by the director's child. Number 20. Ozma's golden dress disappeared into the background.
They reshot those scenes over and over again. The first set, I was in a gold lace dress.
One of the strangest behind-the-scenes mishaps on Return to Oz came during the final reveal of Princess Ozma. In the original shoot, actress Emma Ridley wore a majestic golden gown, meant to emphasize her royal status and make her entrance feel powerful and unforgettable. But when the team reviewed the footage in the editing room, they noticed a major problem. Almost everything in the Emerald City set was already painted in shimmering golds and metallic tones. Combined with the lighting, Ozma's golden gown practically blended into the scenery. Instead of appearing regal and radiant, she looked camouflaged against the backdrop, like she was fading into the walls. The filmmakers realized this mistake long after production had wrapped, forcing an expensive reshoot months later. Ozma was then refilmed in a striking white and green gown, giving her contrast, presence, and the luminous aura she needed to stand out as the rightful ruler of Oz. And there you have it. 20 shocking facts about Return to Oz that prove this children's movie was anything but ordinary.
What's happening? I was gonna ask you the same thing.
From bizarre production troubles to terrifying designs that haunted a generation, Disney's darker take on Oz has earned its place as one of the strangest cult classics ever made. Which of these facts surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more movie secrets coming soon.
Cliff. Saved by her fiancé, he managed to catch up to them and stopped her from going on. Vandals have changed that to suckers. Sort of hints to how Molly's life's turned out, and we learn that the area is a pretty rough neighborhood.
Be careful in the future.
I get it.
Get that?
Life hasn't turned out how they expected though, with a pair getting married in a chapel of love. They also have to watch the scenery channel, so the allure of the almanac becomes even more. Michael even ends up playing his daughter, and luckily it's so distracting you don't even realize that that's not Crispin. When Jennifer first comes in, she also says,
Mom? Mom, is that you? I gotta get out of here.
Which is the same line spoken by Marty when he wakes up confused about where he is in the first film. In the car, we see as Doc grabs onto his visor and says that he thinks he sees a taxi following. At this point, you can also clearly spot he has 2 wristwatches on, showing how obsessed with time that he is. Back in the house, we learn that Marty busted up the scenery screen after the guy who installed it called him chicken, and we learn how much this word is very triggering for him.
About 30 years ago, your father tried to prove he wasn't chicken, and he ended up in an automobile accident.
Oh, you mean with the Rolls Royce?
This Rolls Royce pops up at the end of part 3 and shows how he narrowly managed to avoid that path. Now when Junior returns home, we see how he turns on some channels, and in the top right we can see one for breast implants. Potentially this is foreshadowing what Lorraine would be forced into, and she ends up getting them in the alternate timeline. This timeline then gets created when we watch Biff taking the DeLorean. Biff doing this is given away when we see the inside of the car later on, as we can catch the date last visited on the bottom line. Had they picked up on this, then they'd have realized someone else had been in the car and instantly figure out exactly what had happened. Back in the house, we see them cooking a pizza, which has the Pizza Hut logo on the front of the packet. Now, according to IMDb Trivia, Pizza Hut wanted the brand to look good, so they provided a professional food stylist for each and every take. They also installed a proper pizza kitchen at the south and made up new ones for every single shot. At this point, he's egged on by Needles, who's played by Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. This is immediately caught by the boss, and he's fired on the spot. Now, there's a little detail that gives away Needles was in on it, as we can catch him looking off as the call ends, which is likely to the boss. McFly's boss is also Japanese, which was due to the country's dominance when it came to industry. This was in a time in which lots of our items were made in Japan, and both this and Blade Runner predicted them being world leaders in technology. I think at the heart of this though is that it hammers home the message of the movie, which is about the dangers of trying to get rich quick. Marty Jr. is arrested because he goes in on the scheme, and Marty of course tries to grab the almanac. Here we also see him getting roped into doing it again, and all of the outcomes just lead to disaster. Jennifer then encounters herself, we see as Biff rolls in, and in a nice bit of attention to detail, you can catch ice coming off the top of the car like how it did in part 1. Doc also foreshadows his actions in the future as he talks about going back to the Old West.
My only regret is that I'll never get a chance to visit my favorite historical era, the Old West.
He says this is to study the greatest mystery in the universe, women, with that basically being what his arc centers around in part 3. We can also catch Biff thrashing away, which is of course because he got erased from time. And because of this, people have wondered why that Biff's still not around. Technically, he would still exist after the time change, he'd just be different to the old man that he was here. Gale and Zemeckis actually put things in place to clear this up, and they were going to reveal something in an earlier draft. We would learn that Lorraine shot Biff in '96, which explained why the Biff years started to vanish, like my subscribers now that comic book movies aren't popular. Returning back to 1985, there is a couple of signs straight away that something's amiss. As they pull in, we can see a battered car in a driveway and trash piling out of every bin. As they go to drop Jennifer off, we can also see a total car on hers with bars on the windows. Now, what I love, well I shouldn't say love, what I find funny is that they just drop Jennifer off on her porch, leave her there and say, if we sort stuff out, it'll be fine mate. No need to worry about Jennifer, just leave her on the porch in hell and go change the timeline, and in the end, it'll just work itself out. Like, come on mate, I don't know if that would be the case, and I would have found it hilarious if they got Claudia Wells back to show up in part 3 like nothing was wrong. But alas, they don't do that, and they just dump her in the bad timeline. We then cut over to Linus Day, which is filled with graffiti and stray dogs. We can also catch multiple for sale signs outside every house, and it looks like these belong to Biff. Though they're difficult to make out, that does look like his logo, and Marty's the only one without a sign outside of it.
Oh, right, you keep running, sucker! And you tell that realty company that I ain't selling, you hear?
Thus this makes sense with Biff taking over the town. I feel like the family scene is kind of playing off the Peabody scene, in which he gets chased into the night. He ends up making it out to Strickland's, who holds him up at gunpoint, and in the end we discover the school burned down. In the 4K version, you can make out there's a scar over his eyes, and then his house is shot up showing what Biff's leadership's like. Hill Valley has become Hell Valley, and we once more get a return of Red Thomas.
Crazy drunk driver.
Watch where you're going! Crazy drunk pedestrian!
In case you missed our last video, Red was the mayor in 1955 who ended up homeless after losing his job. The clock tower has now been turned into a monument to Biff, but hey, at least he fixed the ledge. Still though, the strip clubs are in full effect, tanks roam the street, and we discover that smoking's required if you want to go inside. Seeing his black car outside the hotel, we then learn of Biff's life since the timeline change. We also get a moment showing Buford Tannen setting up the third film's villain. He ends up looking a bit different how he does in part 3, with this being an early makeup test. We also get a moment showing Buford Tannen setting up the third film's villain. He ends up looking a bit different how he does in part 3, with this being an early makeup test. Dubbed the luckiest man on earth, he's used his fortune to legalize gambling, and in the end has managed to build an empire. Dating Marilyn Monroe, he ended up marrying his high school sweetheart, which even old Biff still had his eye on.
Hey kid, say hello to your grandma for me. Say hi to your mom for me.
Grabbed by matches, 3D, and the other one, we then see as Marty's escorted upstairs. You can catch that 3D is once more wearing 3D glasses, but in the 50s these were made of card. Man's now going up in the world though, as he has proper frames for this, and Match also still has this match in his mouth, and we then get this bit.
We can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way.
Always kind of made me wonder who was saying the easy way, but shoutouts to Niles7658 on Reddit for pointing this out. If you speed up the easy way bit, you can actually hear it's Michael J. Fox.
The easy way.
Also, I love how the easy way is just knocking him out, because in the world of Biff, the hard way ain't good. Waking up in bed with his mother at his side, the scene of course riffs on the one from the first film with her nursing him awake. Sat up in bed, I love how most of the actions play off that scene, with Lorraine now being scared of Biff instead of fearing her mother.
Oh my god, it's your father.
Lorraine, are you up there?
Oh my god, it's my mother.
Living in what's got the decor of Scarface's mansion, we see Lorraine stumble over to a load of bottles. Beside this, we can catch a tape called Black Taboo, which was an adult movie that was about incest. I don't know why all these movies have something like that, but here we are.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Now we discover that, though Lorraine wants to go, Biff's bankrolling her kids. This includes Linda, who was originally going to be a lady of the night. However, Wendy Jo Sperber was pregnant at the time, so they thought the optics of that, it might be a bit bad. You're better off just sticking with incest, mate. Not much better. Either way, Joey is mentioned as being behind bars, with this also being a carryover from the first film. In the end, Marty finds out his dad's dead, and we see as he goes to visit his grave. This lists his date of birth as April 1st, giving an idea that his life was a joke. You might also notice that he died on the Ides of March, which is known as a day in which you settle debts. Smart. We can also see the factories behind Marty burning in the back, showing how Biff turned it into an industrial wasteland. Joined by Doc, we see a newspaper chronicling his death and get some hints as to what the world's like. There's a standoff with some Native Americans, which was put in place to foreshadow Marty coming across them during Part 3. You also see a bit about the Watergate revelations, which in the end changed the fate of Nixon. On the left, we can see that there's a strike with oil workers and a record number of new claims for unemployment filed. The main page becomes important as, like the photograph, it shows when the future's being changed. Doc then shows that in this reality he's being committed, which was something that was foreshadowed earlier in the film.
Changes over the years, they simply assume she's the Jennifer of the future. Well, we gotta stop him. What are we gonna say? That we're time travelers? They have us committed.
I know you can also take it as Biff getting him out of the way, but I just thought that it was interesting that they had this line earlier. Either way, Marty flips the paper around, we get Nixon, and a headline about how there's a pollution alert in Hill Valley. Lastly, if you check out the bottom one, you'll see that Biff Co. has taken over Lone Pine Mall. That's Lone Pine because the events of the first film still happen, with George beating Biff up at the end. This is why Lorraine said Biff would never be the man George was, because she'd known him in his more heroic incarnation. It also explains why he had him killed, because George had been the one standing up to him. Returning to Biff's, we then get this line,
"How'd you get past my security downstairs?"
And as we see, Marty came in the DeLorean, explaining how he managed to make it past. They bring up the lightning strike, the car getting rolled in manure, and also the crazy man that showed up with the book. Marty also grabs some matches before things lead into Biff blowing off his gun. Racing downstairs, I always appreciated how slick it was with Marty jumping across staircases in order to escape. Getting to the roof, he manages to make it out, with the DeLorean being held in the air through using fiber wire so that it appeared invisible. Back in the DeLorean, we see the time circuit display flash 1885, foreshadowing where Doc will go at the end of the film. Arriving at Line Estates, they then park the car where the original DeLorean was hidden. At this point though, the older version was moved to the lab, explaining why this spot is now vacant. We also get a repeat of the blocking that was used in Part 1, with one character running close to the camera while the other one runs into the background. Opening up a suitcase full of money, we can also see Doc has cash from different eras. When I paused this, I was wondering why there were two bills for 1864, and not being up on my American history, I did a little Google search. So it turns out this is actually due to the Civil War, which had two types of currency out in circulation. Really nice attention to detail, with it showing how prepared that Doc is. At Biff Grandma's Gertrude Tannen, we also hear Thomas F. Wilson providing her voice.
Where are you going, Biff?
I'm going to get my car, Grandma.
When are you coming back?
Cutting to the town square from the 50s, we see Terry with Biff arguing over the money. Again, this would have made more sense with the deleted scene and explain all that terrible old man makeup. Biff also says that only he knows how to start that car, which is something older Biff later does to get him into trusting him. At this point, Biff spots Lorraine, who we see excited over a new dress. This was something that was also a bit of a nightmare because the crew had gotten rid of most of the clothes from the first film. This of course included Lorraine's dresses, namely the spare ones they kept in case one got damaged. However, Leah Thompson revealed that she'd kept one and actually had to drive home to get it for the shoot. Biff declares his love for Lorraine. She says she wouldn't date him even if he had $1 million, and you can see how those lines play off down the line. Now from here, Biff's taken to the garage in which he interacts with his other self. These scenes were shot using the Vista Glide, which at the time was completely groundbreaking. It allowed actors to play multiple parts in the same scene and have them all blend together seamlessly, bar a few little moments. Earlier in the movie at the McFlys, we had Fox playing 3 different characters in one scene, which was the first time it had ever been pulled off in a film. That shot was divided into 3 parts, whereas here they used the middle of the windscreen to help mask the coverage. Biff then says,
"Now why don't you make like a tree and get out of here.
So why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
It's leave, you idiot. Make like a tree and leave. You sound like a damn fool when you say it wrong.
Also, once Biff correctly shows the results, we can see as the older one starts to disappear. As he hands over the book at roughly the 1 hour 9 mark, you can see his arm starts to fade away. This is similar to how Marty's hand did in the first film, showing how things have now been changed. This was then going to be expanded on in a deleted scene where we'd see Biff completely disappear. Instead, they just had him writhing around in pain, but that shows him completely fading from existence while Einstein barks at him. Across town, Doc then talks to himself while his past version sets up the machine. Now obviously, when you have moments like this, people often go back to check if they took extras from the background of the first film and retcon them to be Doc. Going back, fans have speculated that you can catch someone in Doc's clothes, and thus I went back to check for myself. However, I'm not sure if that's the case, as we can only catch 2 people in a trench coat and hat. One of them is at the 1 hour 16 mark, but this guy isn't wearing the same colour as Doc. The other is at 1 hour 15:55, and as Marty writes a letter, we can see someone in the street who looks a bit similar. However, he's not with his bike, so yeah, I think people are just dreaming like me when I said the hand disappeared, even though most people say it's just the Vista Glide. But let me dream, yeah? Anyway, at the dance, we of course see George doing his best Nutty Professor, and also Biff, who then goes outside. Reading Ooh La La, this would end up being what he puts the dust jacket on. When Marty goes to grab the almanac from his pocket, we can see that it doesn't have it, showing that he likely always planned to slip this on over it. This then sends Marty on a big wild goose chase, in which he has to sneak past himself. I think it's these moments that really make the movie work, and it's so cool seeing the first film played from another angle. As he goes to Strickland's, we can also see a sign above the door, which you can see says SS Strickland. Now this was obviously put in as a reference to how harsh he was, with it being a nod to his heavy-handed totalitarian rule. However, according to IMDb trivia, it was later altered in the game to be Stanford S. Strickland when we learn more about the character. On his desk, we can also catch the Stars and Stripes, which has the correct 48 stars in it for what would have been the case in 55. Finally, getting the book back, he realizes the truth, and we see as the scene plays out where George saves Lorraine. The guy says,
Room, okay, a little bit of air. It's okay, I know CPR. I know CPR. Hey. What's CPR?
And this is due to this not being invented until 1960. We then see Doc taking off in the car, which bumps against the Line Estate sign. This is what then triggers the malfunction and sets the path for him to go back in time. Now originally, they had a scene that tied in the first movie, and this would be caused by Old Man Peabody. Now the details on this are a bit sketchy, but from what I could gather, Peabody had been considered insane after telling everyone about the town that he'd seen a spaceship. He'd be put in an asylum, but then let out, which is when he spotted the DeLorean in the sky. Both the police and Peabody would then start shooting at it, which is why it would end up being damaged. This was removed by the time they got to the later drafts, with them simplifying it to just being a crash. Marty also has to intervene with stopping himself from being attacked in the past, and he drops a sandbag on Biff's gang. I love how they're just standing there waiting to beat on him, but also tapping away to the beat because Johnny Be Good is so good. You also see Marvin going to the phone, which as we know would be him calling up his cousin Chuck. Marty makes his way outside, which is when he's confronted by Biff, and he ends up being knocked out by his past self exiting the building. So well put together, and it just ramps up the tension because you know that they're on a ticking clock too. Chasing him across town, we hear there's an incoming storm on the radio, which as we know would come to hit the clock tower.
A severe thunderstorm is heading for Hill Valley.
Marty and Biff wrestle back and forth with the bug, which then leads to Biff getting covered in manure. So from this point onward, the timelines changed, and Big Bad Biff would never get power. He'd never get to kill George, never build the casinos, never get implicated in the list, never force Lorraine to marry him, and never control Marty's life. From this point, they then travel back to Lion Estates, where both the matches and newspaper slowly start to change. This turns Biff's casino back to his auto detailing, which is of course a job he worked in the secondary timeline. George McFly is now being honoured, and Doc Brown's commended instead of being committed. You can also see that Nixon, to seek a fifth term, has him vowing to end the Vietnam War by 1985. This then changes to Reagan, with Biff Co. also being changed to a story about the town's mayor. However, after a lightning strike, the DeLorean sends him off into the past, and at this point we can see what looks like a burning backwards 99. Many have thought this represents how many years were travelled, but mate, I'll be honest with you, the math ain't mathin'. Since then, Gail has explained that this is because of the wheels of the DeLorean, which were spinning so fast it caused this in the sky. Either way, Marty gets a letter which just so happens to be delivered while it's raining, bringing together both the postal service and weather like what we talked about before. Guess they were efficient in the end, and they've held on to it for 70 years. Revealing docks back in 1885, Marty races back to the clock tower, and if I was this guy, I'd be like, what, I'm following him, I want to know more. Here we see his past version travel back, which of course I'm sure you can guess pulls from the first film. Love the way that they kind of play this scene out and then just have Marty racing up to him after he just disappeared. You can spot the fire lines when we cut to the new shots, but hey, I'm not mad at you. And we end with Doc fainting as we close out part 2. This then leads into a trailer for part 3, showing the frolicking adventure that we're gonna get next. This is easily one of my favourite Clint Eastwood films, and in it we see as Marty desperately tries to save Doc. Now, the entire premise of the movie was set up by a line in part 2, in which Doc talked about what his hopes and dreams were.
My favorite historical era, the Old West. The time traveling is just too dangerous. Better that I devote myself to studying the other great history of the universe. Women.
Not only does he get to go back in time, but he also gets to meet the love of his life. There's a lot to uncover, unpack, and talk about, and great Scott, I can't wait to get into it. So come with me, my partner in time, smash that thumbs up button, and let us get into Back to the Future 3. Now, unlike the gap between part 1 and 2, part 3 was all pretty much in place when it came to production. Shot back to back, this latter film didn't have the issues that the first two did in terms of recasting people like Eric Stoltz and Crispin Glover. Everything was locked in and ready to go, but with it being 2 movies, there was still a lot to get through. Both were filmed together in the course of 11 months, with Zemeckis having to shoot part 3 while editing part 2. Nowadays, you could just do it online digitally on your laptop, but back then they had to have physical film reels and also big editing rooms. Zemeckis would film part 3, finish for the day, fly out to Burbank, and then work on the edit. He'd then make the changes, go to sleep, and fly back to Cali to shoot part 3. Going on for about a month, this is something he said wiped him out, but he managed to get the 2 films released within a year of each other. Anyway, that's his short but sweet making of trivia, and that takes us back to the future. And the film begins with the first showing of the 75th anniversary Universal logo. Not only was this the company celebrating the last 75 years of its work, but it also thematically helps to set the stage for the film. We will of course be going back through the ages to witness how things all began in the town of Hill Valley. Picking up immediately after part 2, we begin like the last 2 did, with the date at the bottom displaying when this is. In it we get the ending of part 1, and then watch as Marty goes back to the future. This then segues into part 2's final scene, and we get Doc Brown's collapse. A really cool thing you can do here though is that you can actually end part 1 and then jump from here immediately to part 3. Seeing these from Doc's perspective, you can just watch these back to back and then learn about what happened in part 2 directly from Marty. Don't do it, mate. Don't bloody do it, you sicko, going from 1 to 3, but it shows how well crafted these films are in terms of cohesiveness. After the title sequence, we then cut to the sky, juxtaposing the bright clouds that opened up part 2. This thematically showed a possible sunny future, whereas in this instance, it symbolises the darkness with the way the film ended. Returning to Doc Brown's home, we then get some cool Easter eggs that reference the first film. In Doc's garage at the start, we could see 4 science figures, with this being Isaac Newton, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Edison, and lastly Albert Einstein. Cut to Doc's home in 1955, and he also had these images right above the fireplace. These return in the exact same spot, and we then cut down to see the letter Doc wrote being dried out on the fire. There's the hoverboard, the dog Copernicus, and we then cut to the TV playing Howdy Doody. This was a kids show set in the Old West, foreshadowing the trip that Marty makes throughout the movie. The theme of the show was initiating the first screenplay draft for part 1 before it was changed out for that long opening one-shot. After realising Marty's there, he then backs into the bathroom, and we can see a clock hanging up on the wall. Cut back to part 1.
I was standing on the edge of my toilet, hanging a clock. The porcelain was wet. I slipped, hit my head on the edge of the sink, and when I came to, I had a revelation. A vision. A picture in my head. A picture of this. This is what makes time travel possible.
And this is the same clock that he was referring to then. Going into the garage, we can then see a fire extinguisher that was used in part 1 to put out the fire caused by the model. This was notably almost empty, explaining how Doc's house burned down, which we learned from that news report. The model car is then shown at 8 minutes and 54 when we see Marty pull it out the bin. We also get the crude model of Hill Valley before then cutting to the mind-reading machine Doc wore in that film. This room's a perfect recreation of it, with the model even having Doc's wristwatch in the clock tower. This is set at 10:04, which is when the lightning strike hit it. This is given further reference at 41:52 when we can see the clock face in the background at the train station. This is set at 10:04, which brings things full circle from how it starts and ends.
And it's all connected.
Back with Doc, he finishes his letter, and we can see 2 watches on his wrists. This is something the character wears throughout the franchise, again showing his big obsession with time. Now technically, this should start on the timeline that creates something else in 1985. So far we've had the original one, and then the Lone Pine Mall one from the end of part 1. Part 2 had the alternate 85 before Marty went back and changed things to the end of part 3. That means that this moment didn't alter the timeline, and that it was actually always meant to happen. I think, and it's lots of timey-wimey wibbly-wobbly stuff, but if you view this in that way, it makes more sense. Doc ended up ripping Marty's letter at the end of part 1, but we saw that he'd put it back together. I think him getting a letter from himself, yeah, maybe what could have changed his mind, but yeah, that's probably me retconning it, because I doubt they planned it out that much. However, that does make it slightly more enjoyable, and he also leaves himself a note saying,
Remember to walk him twice a day and that he only likes canned dog food.
This is something that we saw piling up at the start of part 1, and I do appreciate they kind of went back and referenced this. Now from this point they go to the cemetery, which is where they dig up the DeLorean. We hear Doc say,
The time I attempted to reach the center of the earth, I've been reading my favorite author, Jules Verne.
These lines are very important as it lays the seeds for his Jules Verne obsession. Clara later says she's a fan of him too, and we watch as the pair start to bond over him. When the pair return to the future, we also meet their kids, which we learn are called both Jules and Verne. Beyond that though, this speech has a little Easter egg as Doc talks about one of his favourite books. That is,
Just like in Journey to the Center of the Earth,
which the future Doc references in how he buries the car. In the novel, a professor and his nephew went to the centre of the earth, and they were following clues left by an adventurer. In order to lead them into the passages, he engraved his initials, which were AS. This is something that Doc Brown does too, as we see his initials ELB carved into the wood. After finding the DeLorean, they see the chip, and Doc says,
No wonder this circuit failed. It says made in Japan.
Japan, of course, dominated the economy in the 80s, and Marty even worked for a Japanese corporation during part 2. Now from this point, they discover Doc's grave, and we can see that the death date's September 7th. In the film, Doc was actually shot on September 5th, meaning that it took another 2 days for him to die. From this point on, they then study Buford Tannen, who got a little cameo during part 2. This had him with a slightly different look, as the photo used here was an early makeup test. Gail wanted Buford to represent Biff's worst intentions, realizing a person who could do what they wanted. Looking at films, they based him on Liberty Valance from the classic western The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Why don't you get yourself a fresh steak on me? Show's over for now.
8 o'clock Monday, bro. If you ain't here, I'll hunt you and shoot you down like a duck.
We then see the history of the McFlys, with Marty then saying,
Your family. Your relatives?
My great-grandfather's name was William. That's him. Good-looking guy.
Guy is obviously played by Fox, foreshadowing how he also plays Seamus as well. The one in the book is a man called William, who Marty later meets as a baby in his crib. This is a scene that calls back to his uncle Joey, who he also met as a kid during part 1. Doc also mentions his family name was the Von Brauns, which is a reference to the scientist Werner von Braun. This was one of Germany's leading rocket scientists who got brought to the US during Operation Paperclip. Marty then looks through some photos, with one of a woman being of a saloon girl. She's called Dolores Miskin, with her possibly being a relation to Sylvia Miskin. In the game we met her and learned that she was George's mother, tying it all together from this little photograph. To the right of her we can also see the saloon, which is a location that we go to in the film. Lastly, we see the photo of Doc Brown, who at that point poses in front of the new clock. The time on it says 8:08, with IMDb trivia stating this is a reference to 88 miles per hour. At this point, Marty then vows to save him, and we see as he brings up your boy Clint Eastwood.
Clint who?
That's right. You haven't heard of him yet.
Now look what Marty does at that moment, mate, and you can see that he points at the wall. Going back a bit, we can see that this is him pointing at posters which offer Tarantula and Revenge of the Creature. Both of these featured a young Clint Eastwood who, at the time, hadn't made his name yet. Eastwood gets a lot of deep cuts in the film, with Marty using his moves to help save his life. During part 2, Biff watched a fistful of dollars, which had him using a makeshift bulletproof vest. This is something Marty does in the film as well, with him using a metal stove door during their duel. When Doc shoots Marty down from the hanging rope, it's also something Eastwood's character did in The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. This is how he rescued the character Tuco, who was also made to hang from a rope as well. Pale Rider was shot at the same place that this was, with them even using some of the buildings for the background of Hill Valley. On top of that, we also have Eastwood Ravine, which is what we see the sign say at the end of the film. This was formerly known as Clayton Ravine because it's where Clara Clayton was originally going to fall into. Eastwood was asked for permission to use his name, which he gave after saying that he really loved the reference. Now, the idea to hit the Wild West actually came from Fox when they were on set joking about where things could go. Fox said that he'd love to hit the Old West and have Marty and Doc dressed up as cowboys. There was the idea that they could go there in the second film, but Zemeckis wanted to delay it until we got to part 3. They also realised when crafting the script that they'd gotten everything out of Marty that they felt that they could get. Thus the attention was turned to Doc Brown, with a love story being crafted out of the character Clara Clayton. This was written with Mary Steenburgen in mind, who'd previously been in the film time after time. This was also centered around time travel, with it having elements set in San Francisco. They gave a little nod to this during the script when they say,
How far does the 8 o'clock train go?
San Francisco is the end of the line.
Although this was written with her in the part, Mary initially turned down the role. However, her kids wouldn't let it drop, and eventually they convinced her to take part in the film. Beyond this, Zemeckis and Gale also wanted to pay tribute to the genre, which in the 90s had kinda died out. However, it did get somewhat of a revival, with Dances with Wolves winning the Best Picture the next year. Unforgiven was about to roll into production, and you could argue that this dropped at the right time. So Zemeckis, he looked at getting in veteran actors who would be notable faces that people recognize from the westerns. In the saloon, we have the quote-unquote old-timers who are played by Pat Buttram, Harry Carey Jr., and lastly Dub Taylor. These were pushed in the behind-the-scenes stuff to show how much attention they were paying to the genre. Ronald Reagan was also approached for the film too, with the idea he'd play the mayor of Hill Valley. Reagan's someone who we've talked a lot about in these breakdowns, and if you want to hear about those stories, then go back to our part 1 video. He was then included in part 2, with hopes then being that he'd show up in the flesh for the third and final film. Unfortunately, he ended up declining, which is a shame due to how much his notoriety in westerns would have made his cameo pop. Now back with Doc, he says,
For all, we can't risk sending you back into a populated area or to a spot that's geographically unknown. You don't want to crash into some tree that once existed in the past.
This is a little nod to the first film, as in that Marty ended up crashing into Peabody's tree, which changed the mole's name. He also says,
Remember where you're going, there are no roads.
You get it, mate, with it being a callback to this line.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Driving at the sign, we then get what's probably my favourite time travel transition in the entire trilogy. Heading at the Native Americans, this is then turned into real life ones, being at that spot in the past. After encountering the cavalry, we see that they have a flag with 31 stars on it, which is what was carried at the time. Unfortunately, the fuel line's been damaged though, and Marty's then chased out of the cave by a bear. Now, not to be a dickhead, mate, not to be a dick, but this plot hole, it always did my head in a bit.
Why?
Well, I'll tell you why. You see, the fuel leaking, it means they can't get it up to top speed, and thus they have to rely on the train. However, there's actually 2 DeLoreans in the past right now. The first of these is the one Marty's driving, but there's also the one that Doc Brown arrived in. This is the one that he buries underground and they end up digging up in the future. So technically, the pair could go out and get this, get the fuel, and then from there travel back. At this point, Marty then comes across his ancestor's farm and he ends up crashing into a fence. On his shirt, we can also see the atom symbol, which is something that was first observed during the 1880s. Knocked out, we then get a scene that's sort of like poetry they rhyme. This is Marty waking up and being nursed by Leah Thompson, which is something that happened in the prior 2 films. Now Leah, or her character, being married to Seamus, I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole, and how Mrs. McFly also looks like his mother. His dad must have married his cousin. Look, we're not going to go that way, and that's the last I want to say about that. Anyway, Seamus busts in carrying some rabbits, with the pair then talking about them over their supper. This again was shot using the VistaGlide, which allowed an actor to play 2 characters in the same scene. This is something that was difficult to pull off, and even in Terminator 2, they ended up hiring twins to get around the problem. Yep, Linda Hamilton as a twin, and that's how she's able to do it in the scene at the end. Terminator 2, right down on the channel right now.
Why?
Now Marty also ends up spitting out the ball bearings which came from the gun that was used to kill the rabbits. After a good night's sleep, Marty travels into town, which is where we get the classic shot of him coming across Hill Valley. This is obviously shot in a similar way across the trilogy, with a camera pulling up to then reveal the town. Beyond that, we also get a little cool detail, which we can see with Joe Statler's horses. Statler's Studebaker Motors appeared in 1955, and it could be seen just after Marty travels back to 85. As he walks in further, we can see the A. Jones manure wagon, which, like the McFlys, was kept in the family. We'll not go down that rabbit hole though, but jump over to 1955, and the name on the manure truck says D. Jones. Lastly is the Wells Fargo building, who are a bank that still operate today. However, by 55 they had left the premises, with this now becoming the Bluebird Motel. I did try looking up the Marshall's sign with Stinky Lomax, but unfortunately I couldn't find any trivia. However, what we get to Saloon, which is in the exact same spot as Lou's Diner. This ended up becoming Cafe Eddie's, and at this point the barman says,
You want water, you better go dunk your head in the horse trough.
After Doc ends up getting the wake-up juice, the first thing he does is run outside and do this in order to get some water. Either way, it kinda carries on the trope of Marty ordering the wrong thing.
Right, give me a Pepsi free.
You want a Pepsi, pal? You're gonna pay for it.
I'll have, ice water.
On top of this, we get the repeating moment in the franchise in which a Tannen walks in and says,
Hey, McFly!
Hey, Gramps!
Hey, McFly!
Now you might also notice that Biff's gang is different, and this was done for practical reasons. All of these were highly skilled horsemen, so shooting these scenes would become a lot easier. It's way easier to teach someone to act than it is to ride a horse, and it kind of reminds me of the Armageddon DVD commentary.
I asked Michael why it was easier to train oil drillers to become astronauts than it was to train astronauts to become oil drillers, and he told me to shut the fuck up. So that was the end of that talk. He was like, Ben, just shut up, okay? This is a real plan, all right? I was like, you mean it's a real plan at NASA to train oil drillers? He was like, just shut your mouth.
Anyway, this time Biff ends up shooting at his feet, and we watch as Marty moonwalks. Part 2 referenced him quite heavily, with him appearing in Cafe 80s and the girls' room in the Nightmare timeline of 1985. Chased in the street, we then see the hanging, which is something that actually nearly killed Fox. Unfortunately, because of YouTube censorship, we can't show these hanging scenes, but I thought I'd at least just go over what happens in them. Now, the wide shot's on him, but when filming the close-ups, the creative team decided they had to get right up to him. They did a couple of shots without the box, and the rope around his neck, with his hands reaching up to hold in between the noose. Unfortunately, on the third try, he miscalculated the position and ended up misplacing his hand. This caused him to block an artery, and in the end, it made him pass out. After this, Fox started getting a twitching little finger, which he stated wouldn't go away. In his biography Lucky Man, he said he then went to the doctors, believing that this was caused by the stunt. After numerous doctor visits, he was told it could be linked to that, but then the condition worsened and spread throughout his body. Eventually, he was sadly diagnosed with Parkinson's, but it was said that the stunt wasn't linked in with it. It's really sad, and often is the talking point of this scene, so I thought I'd clear that up because I know there's lots of different things said about it. Now from this point, Doc ends up saving him, which is when Buford warns him he'll get a bullet in his back. No prizes for guessing what that is, and in Doc's lab we see he's constructed a massive ice machine. The mayor arrives and reminds him about picking up a teacher, which is of course how he meets Clara. Now in what's a great little detail, we can see her before she's properly introduced in the scene at 4151. If you look closely just behind Marty, you will see Clara standing with her back turned. She's someone who was supposed to get picked up from here, but with that not happening, she then went into the ravine. This is even given to us in a line when he's going over the map, talking about what the original name was.
This map calls Clayton Ravine Shonash Ravine. That must be the old Indian name for it.
As we know, they ended up saving Clara, and in the end it's Marty who's thought to have gone over it. Mentioned it before, but that's why Clayton becomes Eastwood, but in saving her, it doesn't really change the timeline. Clara is someone who can be taken away by Doc because in either possible outcome, she's not present beyond this point. Had she went into the ravine or got taken out of time, nothing in the future would have been changed. Doc wasn't originally there, which is why she went over, and this explains why Doc calls it Clayton Ravine. The second instance was when he picked her up and then got shot in the back by Buford Tannen. The third timeline's the one where Marty goes back to help and then helps Doc, who also saves Clara. So that's why Doc thinks it's called Clayton Ravine, even though a name also appeared on his grave. I know people think it's a paradox, but it's lots of timey-wimey wibbly-wobbly stuff, and I must admit, I love the detail of her just standing at the station. It's kind of fate, and even though Doc initially decides to completely avoid her, we see what it leads to in the end. Marty describes love at first sight being like lightning.
You meet the right girl, it just hits you. It's like lightning.
Marty, please don't say that.
And this is because Doc had to deal with it on the clock tower, and it's also what sent him back during part 2. Realizing there's no way to get the car up to 88, they then try horse riding, making gasoline, and finally settle on the train. Now, another nitpick people have is that once Buford's taken out, there's not really any reason for them to rush the train plot. I suppose, mate, but it's a movie and it needs a ticking clock, needs some excitement at the end, rather than just them sitting around and being like, well, turns out the way, let's take time to build a time machine. Now, thinking fourth dimensionally, they realize they can travel across the ravine and land safely in 1985. Saving Clara though, Doc's then tormented, and we get a classic Head of Heart story, which, young love. Now, Doc wants to make up for the cop being destroyed, and he says,
I feel somewhat responsible for what happened.
this is because the man left her at the station, and yeah, nearly got that poor woman killed. Either way, this gets him more into her life, but he's torn between just letting go of her or subscribing in the end, which he should always do. Anyway, at this point, we get a crude model of the town.
I apologize for the crudity of this model, but
Yeah, no, Doc, it's not the scale.
This is a callback to this.
Please excuse the crudity of this model. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it. It's good. Oh, thank you, thank you.
Guys made do with what they had at the time, including bullet casings on the back of the model car. Now, according to the wiki for the movie, Clara was a reference to Mark Twain's daughter, who was called Clara Clemens. According to the story, she was riding horseback and then the animal got frightened and dashed towards a cliff. Saved by her fiancé, he managed to catch up to them and stopped her from going over the 50-foot drop. After a visit from Clayton, that man wants to start dating, and from here we head to the town festival. Starting at the clock, we see his fireworks light the tower, which were purposely put in to mirror the lightning strikes. So we've had a flash and a bang when it started ticking, and this would also be there when it ended up stopping. Doc and Marty then end up getting a photo together, which is taken by the movie's director of photography, the legendary Dean Cundy. Marty says,
Smile, Doc.
While he doesn't. Now, according to IMDb trivia, this is because at the time, people didn't smile in photographs, so Marty's he's bloody pulling his leg.
He's made you look a right knob.
And from here we cut to the band, which are headed up by ZZ Top. They do their signature spin and apparently ended up playing for the cast in between takes. According to the behind the scenes wiki, the ZZ Top manager apparently tried to get them to use their famous car for this film. This was turned down because they already had the DeLorean, but it did make an appearance in the band's music video for the film, which is called Double Back. We can also hear that to buy a Colt Peacemaker costs $12, showing how inflation, or well, deflation, changed the prices of the time. Marty shows his skills calling back to part 2, and this is ripping off from when he played Gundam. The guy running it also says,
I just told you that even a baby can handle this weapon. Surely you're not afraid to try something that a baby could do.
with the kids in part 2 saying,
That's like a baby's toy.
At this point, Buford's gang roll into town, where we meet Marshal Strickland. Hey, he's back, and after he gets them to hand over their weapons, he says this to his son.
Remember that word. Discipline.
Cut back to part 2, and we can see the word discipline under Strickland's name at the hour 19 mark. Passed down through the generations, the man's been handing out discipline, and we were originally going to see him die in this film. When Buford's arrested, this is carried out by his deputy, rather than being by Marshal Strickland himself. This is because Buford was originally arrested for the murder of Strickland, which he'd do by shooting him in the back. They had to redub the lines saying that he'd killed him, and they masked this change by cutting to Doc and Marty.
Buford Tannen, you're under arrest for robbing the Pine City stage. You got anything to say?
I just thought it was too depressing, and hey, it's a fun movie, mate. You don't want to hear about marshals getting murdered and shot in the back while a kid watches on. Anyway, at the dance, we see Marty holds up a plate with frisbee on it that he later uses as a way to stop Buford. This is a callback to what he did in part 2 when we saw him throw the matches holder at the evil Biff. However, beyond this we see it's a pie pan, which is a neat little bit of history for you guys to learn now. You see, the Frisbee Pie Company, that was a real thing, with them operating during the late 1800s. It was then discovered these pans were thrown for fun, and hence the Frisbee, it was officially invented.
I said that's 10, you gutless yellow pie slinger!
Saving Doc, Marty's put into the crosshairs, with him then being called Yeller. They repeat the scene from part 2 with the same blocking that Marty had when 55 Biff called him a chicken at the dance. He also gets a saying wrong.
Hunt you and shoot you down like a duck.
dog, Buford. Shoot him down like a dog.
Calling back to how Biff kept messing up the tree thing.
Now, why don't you make like a tree and get out of here? So why don't you make like a tree and get out of here? It's leave, you idiot. Make like a tree and leave. You sound like a damn fool when you say it wrong.
Learning from Seamus, he discovers he had a brother named Martin who ended up dying because he refused to walk away. It's at this point that the penny starts to drop and Marty realizes he has to be more careful. Out with Brown and Clara, she says,
That one's called Copernicus.
with that being the name of a scientist that the Doc would name his dog after. He then starts alluding to the future and talks about how much the world will change in the next 100 years. She wonders if man will ever step foot on the moon or if they'll hit the thumbs up button, and in the end he starts quoting Verne. Shooting stars fly, and back at Doc's we see is a machine set up to make a cooked breakfast. This is of course similar to the first film, in which he had something set up to give Einstein his food. These gadgets and gizmos took inspiration from Caractacus Pot, who was a crazy inventor in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. This character ended up inspiring Doc's luck, and Marty in the scene also takes from a famous movie, that is Taxi Driver, with him ripping off the mirror scene in that as he practices for Tannen. Later on, he of course also wears similar clothes to Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name, which at the end his brother even points out.
Norm, Marty, who are you supposed to be? Clint Eastwood?
Spotting the gravestone, we see that Doc's name's gone in the photo, implying that it could be Marty instead.
Great Scott. I know this is heavy.
And that's one of my favourite lines in the franchise, as the two characters have finally swapped catchphrases. Such a good little line, and I also love how Doc's hat has the bullet hole in it from where he was shot the night before. Alluding to what happens to Marty in the future, this builds off the back of what Doc touched upon in part 2. This kind of speaks to the themes of the film, and when thinking about it, it's an opposite to George. You see, George in the first film, he was pretty much a doormat that let everyone treat him exactly how they wanted. In the end, he had to stand up for himself, which is something that Marty had no problem doing. However, with Marty, it means stuff goes from 0 to 100 or 0 to 88, and this in the end leads to him injured in a crash. This means that he can't play guitar properly and becomes an old man trying to strum away desperately.
What?
George had to become ready to fight when necessary, whereas Marty has to learn when he needs to walk away. Overall, they become way more balanced and thoughtful characters that do what's right when it's needed, but not to their own detriment. Marty then convinces Doc to break things off because he says that he's a scientist. He wants him to use his brain and not stay in the past, and in some ways it reflects Marty in part 2.
I caution you about disrupting the continuum for your own personal benefit. Therefore, I must do no less.
This is in the same way that Marty stole the almanac, and he'd be messing with time to get what he wants. Personally though, I think leaving Clara in the past, that's gonna cause more issues, mate. So might be time to go out and, old yeller her.
I don't know, maybe we could just take Clara with us.
Or you take her to the future. Now they then roll the car off and Marty says,
Wow, that worked great.
This is actually a little nod to the production crew who were worried that a DeLorean wouldn't fit the track. However, luckily for them, they realised when putting it together that the car actually had the exact measurements required to roll on the railway. Thus, no changes to the car were really needed to be made, and they could just plonk it on the tracks and then keep on moving. Job's done, let's finish early.
This is the way.
After getting slapped by Clara for telling the truth, we then see as Doc goes out to drown his sorrows. The explanation he gives here is also worded very similar to how Marty tells Doc that he's from the future in the first one.
I'm from the future.
I'm from the future.
I came here in a time machine that I invented.
I came here in a time machine that you invented.
And tomorrow I have to go back to the year 1985.
Now I need your help to get back to the year 1985.
Guy stands at the bar with one shot. Wait, is that Doc from The Thing? That's bloody Doc from The Thing.
You son of a bitch.
As he chats with Doc, you can see him holding barbed wire, which might make you think, what the heckins is going on? Well, this figure is actually John Wayne Gates, who worked as a salesman for the Southern Wire Company. As electricity and wires became more commonplace, the man in the company ended up making a fortune. With this, Gates would then go on to found the Texas Oil Company, which years later got renamed to Texaco. Texaco is something that appeared in the first two films, and I love how they managed to get its origins in here. Waking up Marty then rushes into town, and this is so he can grab Doc and the pair can escape. We catch him still holding onto the one shot and can tell by the bottle that he's not drank anything. Now, according to IMDb Trivia, this is a nod to support your local gunfighter, in which Doc Schultz's character ended up drinking way too much. After taking every shot of whiskey, then passed out, which is when the bartender knocked up some wake-up juice. Doc Schultz was played by Dub Taylor, who again's in that group of the 3 old-timers. This wake-up juice ingredients includes Tabasco sauce, with a label being the version used in the 1880s. I genuinely always used to wonder whether something like this would work, and let me know below if you've ever had a crazy hangover cure that's along the lines of this. Now, he's lured out by Buford calling him a chicken, and I love how Morty says it's not 8 o'clock yet.
It's not 8 o'clock yet!
It is by my watch!
And we can obviously see by the clock in the same moment that the time's still 5-2, mate. You got 5 minutes. Now, another issue that's with this duel is that the creative team realized Morty couldn't kill Buford. If he did, then Biff would never be born, and then we'd have both Doc and Morty wiped out as well. So what they did is that they realized Morty shouldn't kill him, and instead he was just gonna fight him with his brain and fists. Thus he confronts him, and we get some classic Western iconography, such as the fingers dangling above the gun. Dropping his and taking the shot, Morty then reveals the bulletproof vest. Vests like this have shown up before, and it's how Doc managed to survive the terrorists in Part 1. If you listen really closely, you can also hear the bullet hitting the metal, which was put in by the sound designers. This is also the second time he's tricked a Tannen by faking his own death, as he jumped off Biff's casino during Part 2. He then beats Buford up, cracks the grave, and then dumps him in manure.
I hate manure.
The kid then gives him his gun back, which the wiki states was supposed to have some other lines. Apparently in the novelization, the kid asks where Morty learned to do that, and he then says that he saw it in a movie. The boy's mother then calls out his name, which we learn is David Walk Griffith. This filmmaking pioneer was born in 1875, and he'd gone to make movies, which is why they said it here. Now from here, we then see as they race to catch the train, but the bad news is Clara's already gotten off. Following it up, we then get what's a pretty cool Easter egg that I did mention in our Part 2 video, but in case you didn't see that, then here's what it is. The Doc Brown's bandana is actually made from the shirt that we could see him wearing throughout Part 2. This shirt had a train and 2 horsemen chasing after it, foreshadowing what was going to happen in this scene. These railway scenes are also shot on the Sierra Railroad, which was used in the Western High Noon. We can also see that the locomotive number is 131, but mate, according to the trivia, yeah, these weren't made available until 1891. I'm bloody furious. It's the worst movie ever.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
Anyway, they start heading to the ravine, with Doc blowing the train whistle and saying, Zemeckis would later reference this in Polar Express when the train whistle was blown there too.
I've wanted to do that my whole life.
Clara tries to climb on board, shit hits the fan, and using the hoverboard, Doc manages to save her. We then see as the pair skate away, and Morty finally gets to go home. The train bit used for this was actually a model, with it then going over the edge into the ravine. Back in the future, or past for us, the car gets destroyed by a train, and that finally puts an end.
I think I'm ending stream. If anybody's in here and wants to say bye, now is the time.
They said to him, look, you could have smashed through the car, it might be dangerous, are you sure you still want to do it?
Not you, oh my god.
The space at XMKUE5
Trains driving into cars can obviously be very traumatic for the driver if someone's inside, but I can imagine you would want to, you'd have that itch that wanted to be scratched where you just plow into a car, not with people in, but you know what I mean. But it's very rare that drivers would actually get to do this. So him getting to do this was a dream come true,
thanks for the stream.
Hey Ayane, it's been a while, how are you?
Matrix says sorry I didn't say hello till now.
You didn't have to, it's all good. How have you been, Ayane?
Just like you wanted.
Returning to Line Estate, Morty makes it home where we catch his truck in the garage. Biff says he's about to put on a second coat, which is a reference to these lines in the franchise.
Hey, Gramps! I told you 2 coats of wax on my car, not just 1!
Now, Biff, I want to make sure coats of wax this time, not
This
just
is what I've done today.
Matrix says tired, just trying to do stuff and rest.
Putting on the second coat now.
Still ain't bloody done.
Sounds like a plan, man. Okay, and earlier I did.
Realize the shitstorm you've caused. We're traveling across to Jennifer, we see it's all fine and dandy, and then it was absolutely okay leaving her in the prime written 1985. Yep, just leave a young attractive woman on the porch when people are driving by shooting at houses and just go back in time, mate. It's gonna be fine. A little bit of trivia, this was the only scene shot during part 2 that appeared as a new one for this movie. From here they
Actually, let me do a little bit with this.
says the address for success, with it saying the address for suckers in the alternate timeline. Needles then pulls up playing The Power of Love, and he says,
Ayanimatrix says nice.
Thank you, Ayane.
Ayanimatrix says love the rain effect.
Hey, Needles.
Thank you, Ayane.
What's the matter? Chicken?
Unless you want everyone in division to think you're chicken.
And these are my favorite movies, by the way.
part 2 after
Back to the Future.
ruining his life again.
In terms of filmmaking, in terms of a movie,
Marty
I don't think it gets better than Back to the Future.
missing the silver Rolls Royce. The "you're fired" fax text then
Especially Back to the Future 2.
onto the train tracks. Now, I don't get how the train signal knows the train's coming from the past, but it does somehow, and yeah, we see as Doc returns. The train's rocking his initials, ELB, which, as we said earlier, were left on the wood covering the DeLorean. Also, I love how the doors open up like the DeLorean, and if you want to time travel, you might as well do it in style. We also see their sons, Jules and Vern, and gonna point something out that was brought up on a podcast years ago. I can't remember which one. I think it was kind of funny, but since then, I've never not noticed it. Now, as Doc says, the future hasn't been written yet. We can see one of the kids doing a weird gesture with his hand and then pointing at his pants. Apparently, the kid was desperate for a wee, and what he was doing, he was signaling to his mum behind the camera that he needed to go. Don't know why they left it in the movie, but I hope you never work again. I hope you never work again, kid, because you ruined the movie. You scumbag. Anyway, but in the call back to the end of part 1, we see as a train takes off just like the DeLorean and then flies directly to the screen instead of getting a message.
Earlier, Vinduella was in here and he saw this and he's like, "Help me, step bro, I've fallen in the rain."
I dug deep and found out there were plans for part 4. This would see Doc and the family going to Roswell to witness an alien crash in 1947. Marty was going to be absent from most of the script, but he would appear in a cameo role at some point. However, as we know, that never came to be, and both Gale and Zemeckis have both said they'll never allow sequels to be made. As long as they're alive, at least, which I'm guessing some Hollywood executives being like, challenge accepted. However, we did get an animated series which ended up running for 2 seasons and also had a parody trailer for part 4 which starred both Fox and Lloyd. Personally, I hope we don't get a sequel or reboot, and I think some things are just best left alone. Let me know below what you think, and I'd love to hear what you guys would do if you could go back in
Ayanimatrix says,
time.
well,
Personally,
it looks
I'd
more
go back to my
intentional
part
with
2
that
video
expression.
and I'd change the Jaws boxes in the windows were LJN games and not VHS. And maybe if I concentrate, I can do that, maybe. And here we can see the Jaws 1 and 2 game boxes by LJN. We did it! We changed the timeline, and now we can rest. So what's next? Well, we will be working on Dune, Blade 2, Wicker Man, and Terminator 3 breakdowns very soon before shifting over to A Clockwork Orange. I need to stop promising Terminator 3, but I will get to
You're
it.
gonna do a Clockwork Orange breakdown?
Great breakdown. This would be a great breakdown. And Terminator 3, I'm like, don't know if I want to do that. But it is a promise, even though I need to stop promising. And either way, thank you for joining me in this journey. And if you want to support the channel and get to listen and watch these breakdowns early, then please hit the join button. For 99 pence and 99 cents a month, you'll get early access, and it makes a massive difference to the channel. But out of the way, thank you for sitting with us. I've been Paul, you've been the best, and this has been Heavy.
There's that word again, heavy. Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull?
Alright. It is time for me to say bye.
Were not a big deal.
Wait, how long is this video?
Then Rocksteady came.
This is a long video.
Everything
Alright, I am ending stream.
handed to Rocksteady Studios
Take care of yourself.
with vision, passion,
Ayane, etc.
that not only set the standard, but influenced action games for more than a decade. The Batman Arkham trilogy, but with just one title, they burned a
Ayanimatrix
decade
says,
of goodwill
"Alrighty,
to the
man."
ground. From
Take care of yourself, man.
License
Good night.
Is that a trend you want to keep going?
to causing the law